is excused.
Okay, thank you. And maybe Tom Dowry, President of MCTV. Could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
Again, Lord, we heart, I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so we have a presentation with Annual Fire Prevention Month, and we are honoring Diane Stagnaro, a student at one of the elementary schools. So we have the fire, and is Diane here? Come on up.
Good evening. So October marks Fire Prevention Month. We are in the schools this month. We started last week in the schools. We're having a great time out there educating the kids. This year's national theme is Not Every Hero Wears a Cape. Plan and practice your escape. So the concept of the theme is fire escape plans from the home, which was really timely to our annual home fire inspection checklist contest. So we handed out checklists to all of the students in the schools. Those that participated reviewed their homes, walked through, looked if there were any things that needed to be changed with regard to increasing their fire safety within their home. So then the participating students returned the checklist to the fire department. Through a series of random draws, we came up with a grand prize winner for the entire Millbrae School District. So the grand prize is a private station tour for the winner, for friends and family to come and get a private station tour. So along with the mayor, we have a certificate that gives her that station tour. But I would like to introduce second grader Diana Stagnaro from Meadows Elementary. I told her she didn't have to say anything. So anyway, so it's a photo opportunity. If we'd like to take a moment and say congratulations to Diana. Could you want to hold on to both of these? We'll wait a second for Mom as well.
Does Mom want a picture over here? You sure? Oh, you're going to make her stand here. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to our Diana, and thank you to the fire department. Okay, so the next one is about the celebrating Malta's Independence Day, National Day, and their day was September 21st, and Millbrae has the distinction of being the only city, the only American city to have a sister city relationship with a Maltese city, Malta. And Malta, it turns out that 80% of the Maltese in the Bay Area are from Malta, so that makes Millbrae a very special place. And we have Louis Vela here, and we're going to honor Malta. And this through this, I'm going to have we're going to also have the whole crew come up, including the chair of the Sister City Committee, former Mayor Robert Gottschalk, and the former chair, former Mayor Doris Morris. Come on up. So we this most of these people here coming up have went on a trip to Malta, and including myself, and we had a wonderful time. Thanks to Louis for setting us up. And I would encourage anybody and everybody who's never been to Malta to go to Malta. It's
She hasn't been.
it's a beautiful place. It's gorgeous. It's a lot of medieval castles, and it's very walkable, and the food's great, and the people are lovely. So I really had a great time, and I hope other people take advantage of it. So thank you. So would you like to say a few things too?
Right here, everyone. 1, 2, 3.
You guys want to get a picture with it?
Sure. Yeah.
So where's Sister Sue? We're just going to have a lot of bake sales. How squishy. I'm a little shorter than you guys. Hello. My little brother, Louis. Thank you. I don't want to...
1, 2, 3. Good. Okay, perfect.
That's the good thing about being that tall. You can
Thank
hold
you.
it over everything.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Just a couple more. All right. Good. All right. Just a couple of quick remarks. So our Honorable Mayor and Vice Mayor and members of the Council, City Manager, Legal Counsel, City Clerk and staff, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. This is a first and a huge honor and recognition. And I feel I need to admit that I really had nothing to do with this idea. This was all you. So thank you very much. However, this evening I really feel I am in my element, because there was the fire department people, the adoption of the code, Fire Prevention Week. I mean, that is my former life. and I tell you, it was a beautiful and happy life. And but anyway, I digress. The proclamation recognizes 55 years of independence, and Malta is a small island nation. But no matter how small or how powerful, every sovereign nation wants to have the power to govern itself. And this is where this all came to be. Some fight for self-government. We in the United States are one of the best examples when our forefathers fought the war of their lives for independence from a foreign power, which reminds me of a story, and some of you might have heard me say this story. But we all know that the War of Independence was fought between the United States and Britain. And who came to help us? The French, right? So in the 1700s, a lot of people from Malta, who are known to be very good seafaring people, they used to emigrate to Tunisia and to Algiers at the time, which were French colonies at the time. So many of these able-bodied people ended up on the French Navy, and they came to the United States to help the United States win their independence. And I usually end up saying that the number of people varies. Some say several hundreds, and some say even up to 1,400 men came from Malta to the United States to help with the war efforts for independence. And I usually end up saying this, that, I said, how could the United States have lost that war with Malta on their side? So, but even though we're celebrating 55 years, independence did not begin or ended the effort for independence 55 years ago. It started 100 years ago. Exactly this year, on June 7th, 1919, was the first real big push. There was a riot, actually, and there was people who died on June 7, 1919, when the Maltese people rebelled against the British colonists, and they were asking for self-government. That's when it really started, and then it took a long time until 1964, when the independence was granted to Malta. In 1966, the first Prime Minister of Malta came to San Francisco, and they saw the beautiful Maltese community in San Francisco and said, we need to have a consulate here. And the late Charles Vassallo from Millbrae was the first consul general, and I followed him. And 4 years later, here I am. So I do want to say that I want to thank, first of all, the Sister City Commission and the chairman and all the other friends who came to support the honor of this proclamation. And I wanted to just end with this little note that proclamations are a formal process, but this proclamation has a personal process to it. It is not just formal, because when I get this, and usually the ambassador in Washington, D.C. asked me to send him a copy of the proclamation. When he sees this, he doesn't say, oh, yeah, the mayor of, and the vice mayor. He's going to say, oh, Wayne Lee. I know Wayne Lee because you met him in Millbrae in May. And Schneider, oh, yeah. Oh, she's a good friend of mine. We were in Malta and blah, blah, blah. So it changes it from the formal to the personal, which is what we're all about as far as empowering and strengthening the ties, the heritage, and respecting the cultures and the diversity of the countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Louis, for serving both our countries admirably, honorably. And also, I'd like to also point out that we have the Maltese flag here. We've had it here since we began a relationship, and it's always been there. So hopefully someday we can make this a bigger event and maybe do some coordinated efforts in making our relationship stronger. Thank you. Oh, Councilwoman.
Question. When we were in Malta, so the mayor and I were in Malta along with Robert and Eunice and a number, and my sisters in the back there, my fellow honey lovers, they were having their election for the Mosta City Council. And I have forgotten their turnout, but would you happen to know the average voter turnout for an election in Malta? If not, I can guess that it's the number, but.
Correct. For councils, it's usually about 75 to 80%. For the general election, it's about 90, 94, 95%.
Yep. So Malta was just recently in the news talking about the amazing turnout that they get at their elections. And since we had the election group here just before this meeting, so we have a lot to learn from Malta in getting our voters out. So congratulations to Malta.
Okay, thank you. So our next presentation is from the President and CEO of the Millbrae Chamber of Commerce, Lorianne Richardson, and this is about the Man, Woman, and Student of the Year Award.
Thank you. As Wayne said, I'm Lorianne Richardson, the President and CEO of the Millbrae Chamber of Commerce. I am also a member of the Millbrae Man, Woman, and Student of the Year Awards Committee, chaired by Mary Vella Tressler. Each year, our committee, along with the Mayor's Civic Coordinating Council, the Millbrae Chamber of Commerce, sponsors an awards dinner honoring Millbrae's Man, Woman, and Student of the Year. The Millbrae Man and Woman of the Year Awards was established 47 years ago in 1973. We added the Student Volunteer of the Year in 2017. And these awards recognize a sustained effort of community service and dedication. Our 47th annual dinner will celebrate our 2019 honorees. It's at Green Hills Country Club. As you can see on the slide, it's on Friday, October 18th. And let's see. Our 2019 Millbrae Man of the Year is well known to all of us. It's Paul Larson, the owner and president of Chapel of the Highlands in Millbrae.
And Paul's decades of volunteerism began in his youth while he was helping his father with Lions Club fundraisers. And he expanded his volunteerism in his adult life to take nearly every role in both the Lions Club and the Peninsula Council of Lions. He took on roles like newsletter editor, webmaster, photographer. We've all had to worry about Paul's selfie stick, and he has definitely he's been the club president, and he will always be very active in the Lions Club. And he's also served as a director, and he was board chairman at the Millbrae Chamber of Commerce. He currently serves as a trustee and is the vice president of the Millbrae Historical Society, and Paul is also president of the Italian Catholic Federation, branch 403. Oh, and he is a member of the Native Sons of the Golden West. Our 2019 Millbrae Woman of the Year is also very well known to most of us. It's Karen Batuki, and Karen is the head of customer care for Better Up. She's also an accomplished musician. Karen's volunteer history ranges from serving as team parent for Millbrae youth sports teams and scouting organizations to her community leadership roles, including past president of the Millbrae Education Foundation. Karen served on Spring Valley Elementary and Taylor Middle School PTAs, and she's currently the vice president at Mills High School PTO. She works with the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life of North Peninsula and the Peninsula Healthcare District's Community Health Investment Committee. She is Collar Scholarship Chair for South San Francisco Italian American Citizens Club, and Karen also serves as choir director for St. Johnston's Children's Choir, which she's done for 20 years now, and she is the choir director for the Maltese Cross Foundation for 21 years. And finally, we have our Student Volunteer of the Year. It's Desiree Lynn, who recently graduated from Mills High School, and she will study biochemistry at UC Riverside. Desiree participated in multiple community service projects, benefiting mainly seniors and special needs children with the Millbrae Leos Club, and that was her area of interest. She also fundraised for Relay for Life, the Millbrae Education Foundation, Northern California Fire Victims, and, of course, the Lions Club Holiday Gift Card Program. She volunteered with Mills Peninsula Health Services, and she helps her fellow students by tutoring in biology. Desiree also volunteered with the Mills High School Interact Club, serving as club president, and went on to be district governor. In addition to her local community service projects, Desiree also participated in the Global Glimpse Project, where she traveled to the Dominican Republic, helping to improve drainage there and tutoring children in English. Sorry. So as obviously, all of our honorees are very accomplished and exceptional volunteers. But if any of you know an amazing volunteer, we encourage you to nominate them. You can nominate any time of the year. The deadline for nominations is always August 1st. To qualify for these awards, a nominee must live or work in Millbrae, or in the case of the Student Volunteer of the Year, they must go to school in Millbrae. And they must have performed some charitable, humanitarian, community, or heroic act for which they have not been financially compensated. Nomination forms are posted each year on the Millbrae Chamber website at millbrae.com. And monetary scholarship donations do help support the event, and all sponsors are acknowledged on our event program. You are all welcome to attend the awards dinner. That's on Friday, October 18th. It'll be at 6 p.m. and at Green Hills Country Club. And as you can see on the screen, tickets are $55 a person. That's till October 11th. After that, they'll be $60. And if you would like to attend, you can email cqndq@comcast.net. And please include your name, your phone number, your address, and the number of tickets that you'd like to purchase. Or you can just call us at the Millbrae Chamber of Commerce, and we will hook you up. So thank you for your time, and good evening.
Thank you, Lorianne, President of the Chamber. Okay, so it's it's something that we have a lot of great volunteers in Millbrae, so it's a very difficult task, I would think, to choose one person a year. But I hope that it's hard to acknowledge all our volunteers and all the fantastic stuff, but we definitely, one of the unique parts of our city is the spirit of volunteerism, and that everybody's pitches in. And that's what we're going to see. We saw the Scout House, and hopefully we'll see the same thing with the community center. So thank you to everybody. Okay, so next presentations by our Central County Fire Department. Chief Kammeier.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for having us tonight. And all my staff here, I can introduce my staff. There's with me, I have Deputy Chief Bruce Barron, I have Fire Marshal Christine Reed, I have Fire Inspector Julie Parenti, and I have Deputy Fire Marshal Patty Coach, who is our newest member of our prevention team. Okay. Just keep pressing the...
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Well, I can talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as good as the one before.
In there.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just a little overview. We'll kind of review the budget. We'll go over what's going in our operations world for us. We'll talk about prevention, community development, and we'll talk about wildland-urban interface. So first, the budget. So our total budget for CCFD this year, as you can see, is just north of $26 million. That's from all of our contributing. Sorry.
Mike, too, if that's more comfortable.
Those are from all of our contributing agencies. Millbrae's portion of that is what you see, is that $7.4 million. Roughly about $1.3 million from the fire assessment in Millbrae goes towards that amount. That's a little bit of the offset for there. So in our operations world, last year we had a lot of state and national responses, deployments, and this year, knock on wood, and hopefully we get to the next couple of weeks, we haven't had a lot of state deployments. There haven't been a lot of significant catastrophic wildfires, so we've had a pretty good year with that. The states overall has had a really good year with that. We did have a deployment to the East Coast during the hurricanes we had on the East Coast last month from the members of our USAR team. We had 3 members that went to the East Coast. Fortunately, they didn't see a lot of action. The storm didn't. They were deployed out to North Carolina. They didn't see a lot of work. There was already a lot of pre-deployment, and the damage wasn't as bad as they thought, so they came home safe and sound. That deployment is 100% covered by FEMA, so we were reimbursed for that, and we are not out of pocket for those monies at all. One of the big things we've been doing a lot over the last few years anyway, and this year is no exception, is a lot of hiring. We have a lot of retirements and people coming in. So our last pool of people, we had about 5 new hires, and we are projected to hire in the next 6 months probably 6 more firefighters. We did lose 2 probationary firefighters in the last 2 months. Just they don't meet the standard, and so they don't meet the standard during probation, and they're released. And so we're trying to keep up with that. That's a pretty heavy toll because it doesn't sound like a lot, but it means there's at least minimally 2 to 3 probationary folks on duty every single day. And so there's a lot of training that goes into it. It's an 18-month process for them to get through that. So it's a pretty demanding training program that we have them under, but also a lot of expectation from our staff to make sure they receive that training. So that's been a lot of what is going on. And then speaking of training, one of the more significant trainings that we had was at the Mills High School, where we had the violent intruder drill that was along with our law enforcement partners. It was put on by San Mateo County OES, but it was our training division put a lot of into that, and also being local, there was a lot of direct benefit, and that's more extensive than we have in the past. And working with Chief Kunkel, we made sure that our folks that here locally had a large attendance at that drill, so that was pretty significant for us. Our training division, which is just at the firehouse here, continues to serve all the fire agencies from San Bruno down to Belmont. It's a collaborative training division that we have. And it's actually, we had a reorganization last year, which ended up having a pretty good savings for us because of the reorganization that we did to have a better, efficient deployment of the training. And so we have a lot of new faces in training as well for the last 12 months. So that's gone really well for us. So we're really happy with that. In terms of responses, and this response number will become more significant over the next probably 24 months as we see some development coming in. So we've been talking for a couple years with some of these bigger projects coming in. How is that going to affect operations? So we certainly have our eye on that. I'll get more into the development and the expected development coming. But in terms of operational, these are the numbers we're seeing, and those are by station. And the 2019 is just year to date, so that's not a complete number. That's just so far. So right now the mean in there is kind of plus or minus what we would expect. So again, the next 24 months is really going to be a key indicator of how much is this number going to rise, if at all. And that is something that we're working on. A couple weeks ago at our fire board meeting, as we were discussing some of the impacts of development that may hit our operations division, we were asked to be given direction to start to pursue a standards of cover. So what a standards of cover does is it takes in consideration our current staffing, the current dynamics of our communities, and then the expected development to come, and if there's going to be any operational improvements we will need to make. And so we are just doing the initial research in that. We would be expecting to ask for funds for that standards of cover in our next budget, so we would expect next calendar year for that to get done. It's about a 2 to 4 month process, and we're actually looking to split that study with San Mateo Consolidated Fire to reduce the cost on that, because we are so impacted by our neighbors, both with help from them and giving help to them. So we want to make sure it's a balanced and fair system. Standards of cover helps us understand and implement measures to make sure that we are meeting our operational needs. And this is just sort of the pie chart of our predominant, what our call is. So, of course, most of our calls are EMS driven. A lot of them are, obviously we don't have a significant number of fires. Thankfully, we did have a fire the other night just over on the border of Burlingame and Millbrae, which I know that you were all sent an email to that. But, a lot of these are the good intent calls and service calls. A lot of those are either going out to help somebody who's in a non-emergent distress. So, for instance, a water heater that's busted and they don't know how to turn the water off, or an elderly person who's fallen out of bed and their significant other or family can't get them back into bed. So we do a lot of that stuff too, and so that takes up a good share of our calls. And as I shared with you last year, we have a high population of skilled nursing facility residents because of our location to the hospital, and so a lot of our call volume does go to that as well. So right now, where we're seeing a lot of our activity is in the prevention realm, and so this next section is a little lengthy, but I think it's important for us to kind of make sure that you're understanding and clear on where we are with this. So in fire prevention, there's a number of things that have happened. So this year, we have been mandated by the state to, under SB 1205, to do all of our report back to our governing body, which is our fire board, and we are bringing these back to the individual councils as well, the mandated inspections. And so that also kind of was on the precipitated the grand jury report on inspections too, which I will get into in a minute. So that's a big part of what we've been working on this year. So the SB 1205 requires us to do inspections on multi-residential buildings and schools. The community development is going to increase it as we see more multi-residentials get built. So we'll kind of review that for a little bit. I'm going to go over wildland-urban interface as well, because we have some new information on that, and we'll talk about how our staffing is meeting the needs of this demand. So this graph right here, these are all of the inspections that we do in the city of Millbrae. So these are just the different types of occupancies and the numbers of them within the cities. Overall, for all of our agencies, all the cities that we serve, we have somewhere around 2,500 inspections. So the volume is pretty high, but these are annual inspections that get done. Now, of these inspections, the ones you see at the bottom, the 183, the multi-residentials, those are a requirement from 1205, and also education. And you can kind of see under education, there's a line that's slashed out, and there's another number there. It's because educational as an occupancy also includes daycares, preschool, and stuff like that. The state recognizes education as public schools or private formal schools and not preschools and other stuff like that. So just to make it clear on what we're talking about. So those are what we inspect every year. Now, the grand jury report came out about 2 months ago, and what it said was basically CCFD has room for improvement. We weren't the worst in the county. We weren't the best. Our goal is to be the best. So we are going to take some of the information that was in the grand jury. We are implementing them actually as we speak. It wasn't significant, but it was related to staffing. It was related to resources and some policies that we had to improve. So in terms of these inspections, the number changes because when we started providing service to Millbrae, and that was in the 2015 timeframe, and then also there was a school added in Burlingame, so that's why you see the number fluctuating there. Now, it's important to probably also kind of keep in context of how these inspections get performed. Most of these inspections get performed at the engine company level. Each captain on every engine gets assigned a certain number of inspections to go handle during the course of the year. They get to monitor and manage their own program, and our expectation is to get these done throughout the year. A lot of things happen in the course of a year. A lot of things happen when you're interacting with schools, whether they're not in school for the summer, whether the engine company goes out there and they get a call and they have to leave. Sometimes it's just not convenient for the time for the school for us to be there. There's a lot of variables in there, so there's a lot of reasons why these schools, in this particular case, they don't get done. Our expectation and my direction to staff was that, moving forward, 100% is our number, and there's no expectations for any less than that. So moving forward, we will hopefully see an improvement. And also with the addition of some staffing that we have, we should see improvement of that as well. One of the most impactful ones is the multi-residentials, and so you can see the numbers there. These ones get a little more tricky because when our engine companies go out and do the inspections these are 3 units or more, and that's what defines a multi-residential. A lot of times it's hard to track down either the property manager or the property owner to either get access or to give them the information that we have that we find if there's any deficiencies. So typically they have 30 days to remedy any deficiency, and then we have to go out. Our number of inspections that don't get passed on the first time are right about 25%. So 25% of the time we're having to go back for second and a third, sometimes further visit. So that gives you some sort of understanding of how we work in this. Now, it was interesting to note that the grand jury report kind of predicated its necessity out of the ghost ship fire, and we all remember that from Oakland. The ghost ship was not a mandated inspection, which I think is what was interesting. It was a very complicated case, but in and of itself, it was not a mandated inspection. Our intention is to do inspections on all businesses, ultimately residentials, in schools, and so that is the goal that we're hitting, and that's the direction that I've given staff moving forward. Any questions on inspections before I move kind of forward? Yes.
When our various engines are called out for mutual aid, does that have an impact on inspections?
A couple things affect that. So each captain has their own, we call it an inspection box. So if they go out on a mutual aid, that would certainly inhibit them from doing that. If they go out on workers' comp or an extended leave, it certainly affects that. Usually what we try to do is we have our battalion chiefs oversee all the captains to make sure and monitor that progress. We're doing a better job of that now, but it can have an impact. But now we've obviously, through the course of the last 6 to 8 months and looking at this information, is making sure that our battalion chiefs, if we have a captain that's out, such as you're saying, that these inspections are getting done by who's ever either working the overtime that day, or if we have an acting captain, that they can take that up so it doesn't just fall into the cracks if that person's not there.
I'm just looking at the data, and given the fire season of 17 and 18, you did an amazing job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, I'm not here to make excuses. 100% is our number, but we have been busy. We had a lot of responses. We have a lot of probationary folks, and a lot of the training gets in the way. And I'll have a little more information for you in a second that we think is going to help to offset this. Because again, my expectation of staff is 100%.
And then my second question: we're later going to be talking about auxiliary dwelling units, and are we? And you don't have to bring it up now, but are we coming up with plans for how we're going to keep an eye on auxiliary dwelling units?
We are, and so we've looked at ADUs in our other communities, and so we're kind of well versed in what the needs are in terms from a fire safety life perspective. Our fire marshal has been involved in that project as well. I don't know if our inspector is going to discuss that later on, but we certainly understand what the needs are for the ADUs and what the fire and life safety requirements are for that. The biggest impact we have is community development. We know with some of these larger projects, with the TOD projects coming in, we have some large projects in Burlingame, that this coupled with the grand jury and the SB 1205, we don't have the staffing to cover that. So last month, I kind of went through a more comprehensive presentation of the problem that we have to our fire board and said there's a couple things that we need. One is we need help with staffing. And so they did approve another fire inspector, because the problem that we have right now is the fire inspector, the deputy fire marshal, and the fire marshal are the only ones that can do new construction inspections, and that's where the bulk of the work is coming. Between Burlingame and Millbrae, we have 40 significant projects coming in the next 24 months. It's a lot. And so currently, as it stands today, in all of our communities, we have 11 high-rises. We will be adding 11 more at the end of these projects. So that fact is not lost on our staff. It's not lost on me, because that's going to drive what we had discussed earlier, some of these operational impacts they're difficult to predict, and that's why that standards of coverage study is going to be so important to us. So we're trying to stay ahead of the curve with the operations piece. We're trying to stay ahead of the curve with the community development to make sure these inspections get done. These are significant projects, much like the TOD, much like as everybody driving up the 101 sees how fast that Burlingame Point project is going up, which is where Oculus is going. Those are just two of projects, and there's probably 15 significant projects like that, not to mention the other 30, plus that are, not our standard projects, but hotels, remodels on multi-residential. So it's significant, and our job is to make sure that those buildings get done correctly with fire and life safety in mind. I have a lot of confidence in my staff on that, but they can only be stretched so thin. And now with the, in the next slide here, we'll talk about wildland urban interface. That's another sort of dimension of fire prevention and the demands that we are expecting of them. And so that's kind of where we are with that. We're trying to meet the needs with staffing and some other things like that. But I just wanted to make sure that you were clear that we understand these impacts and we're ready for them. Before I get to William, I'm just going to kind of give you a quick overview of what we have on our staff. So we have, of course, our fire marshal, which is Christine Reed, which she is back there. We have our deputy fire marshal, which is Patty Koch, so she's back there too. This is just a little primer for the work that they actually do underneath there, just so you're clear on that. We now have 2 inspectors. As I mentioned, the fire board did approve that second inspector a couple weeks ago. We did an internal recruitment, and we expect a promotion in the coming weeks from that. And then we have 3 fire prevention specialists. We have 2 currently, and then we have 1 right now that is going out for applications, because we just promoted we'll be promoting one of those shortly. And so to give you an idea of the levels that we have in fire prevention and the work that they do, I just wanted to make sure that you understood kind of what that was. If there's any questions on that, I know there's a lot on there. Okay. So we've been talking about this for a while, and I know I've been with Councilwoman Schneider. We've had discussions on this. How is wildland urban interface affecting Millbrae? And previously we discussed the state maps don't really designate any what we would call high or very high fire severity zones in Millbrae. There's a little piece of it. It's in the very northwestern part of Millbrae where it touches Crystal Springs Park up there on the border of San Bruno. So, I'm sorry. Thank you. So what we did 18 months ago is we asked our fire board for an independent assessment of all 3 of our communities. It's taken us that long to get the assessment done, performed, and we are just getting back the initial numbers for that. Oh, that's okay. And so I don't have any, we're not done discussing this with our contractor yet, but what we are, and I know that Councilwoman Schneider has been eagerly waiting this, and I've been promising it for a while, so I apologize. We've had some delay on that. But what we are seeing right now, there's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 parcels in this area of Millbrae that may be designated as high fire severity zones. So once we have definitive information and we have the parcel numbers and we have kind of a little bit greater information, we will come back to you with a more formal presentation on that, because then it will be time for the council sort of to determine what are our next steps with that.
Only to bring this up for the people at home. This is unexpected. I thought that it would be off Millbrae Avenue and maybe Vista Grande. This is actually Meadows. For anybody watching, if they can see the map, it's Meadows, and it's going up Tioga. I'm trying to...
And this is not the definitive map. This is just...
Larkspur.
This is just a primer. We'll bring you a more specific map. This doesn't lay out parcels. I didn't want to sound too many alarm bells, but this is just the preliminary information that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. So... Again, it's about 200 to 300, which is not an overwhelming number for us. We have.
Can I say a good news though? If there's any neighborhood in Millbrae, they have the widest streets.
Yeah, and I can talk about the and evacuations is a whole other thing that I'll get to as well. So again, very early preliminary numbers. We have 2,000 of these, in Hillsborough. We have several hundred more in Burlingame. So this is not a new concept for us. If the council wishes for us to bring some recommendations or some options, we can certainly do that when we have that better information for you. But we just wanted to give you an idea, because we've been talking about this for a while, and I wanted to give you at least some information. Okay. That's kind of it for prevention. Before I transition off, I just wanted to kind of open that for questions, because I know there's a lot of information there, so I apologize. But there's just a lot going on, and that's our busiest division as it stands today. So, okay. So moving right along into our fire administration, we've had, again, some retirements and some hirings, so we have some new staff in administration. I also announced my retirement last week. And so I will be retiring at the end of this year. That's the good news, but there's more good news. The good news is just yesterday, and I'd let the city manager know today, that Chief Barron has been appointed the next fire chief when I depart. So you are in excellent hands. And so he can come on up if he wants. I'm going to put him on the spot here a little bit. He loves this, by the way. So he's... Chief Barron is very experienced. He's got 30 years of experience and done almost every position in our department, and so he's an excellent candidate to kind of carry on our mission. So I don't know if he has a couple things he wants to say.
No, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to serving Millbrae. Like the Chief said, I've been serving this community for 30 years, and I believe Central County delivers possibly the best possible service compared to the state. I think we're one of the best. So looking forward to serving you.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you.
For both of you.
I would say he has big shoes to fill, but we have the same size shoes, so it's not a big deal. So. With that, it's my last annual update. So I appreciate it's been a pleasure serving Millbrae, and from kind of the beginning of the relationship with CCFD, it's been it's really truly been an honor to serve this community. I think we've come a long way in 5 years, and I hope that you feel during my tenure that I've kind of lived up to what your expectations are and delivered the service that you would expect, because I demand it of my staff, and I would expect nonetheless for myself. So I'm wide open to questions if you have anything.
Questions? So more questions?
Sorry, Chief, could you go back to the map that shows our potential fire area and Unipacera? We have a resident who's actually trying to do his work of defensible space. He lives on Helen Drive, and he backs up against SFPUC land. Now, I've heard from other members of CAL FIRE that they've got a great relationship out there, but the city had been working on trying to identify who the property owners. There's quite a few trees back there. So as we go forward with the Disaster Preparedness Day for November 16th, and with the new chief coming in, if we can start thinking about how Millbrae might be able to work with SFPUC on defensible space. I'm sure you've been up there. I grew up at the very top of Helen Drive, a house away from Unipacera Park, so I know that park really well. And I know that the people on Terrace, which is that top street on the far north, are concerned about eucalyptus trees up there. So I think this wasn't the area I thought it was going to be, but I think we have some great opportunities and a community that I think will want to work with us.
Sure.
On that.
Yeah, I mean, we have good partnerships with SFPUC. We can certainly reach out and contact them. When we move forward with this, and again, I just kind of want to reiterate, this is just a thumbnail sketch, and this could extend to other areas, but we've been working really hard on wildland-urban interface for the better part of 2 years now, and so we have a pretty good understanding of that, and I think it's really going to be the council's discretion to determine how we move forward, and we are certainly open to whatever that looks like, and we can bring back some options and some recommendations of what you think might be tolerated in the community. Can you tell, especially because we're in fire season now, can you tell the rest of council about the WUI? Did I pronounce it correctly? Yeah. You'll hear WUI a lot because wildland-urban interface gets tiring after a while when you say it a lot. So wildland-urban interface is just the areas where you have this open space that meets up against homes and development. And obviously, as the population grows, we're encroaching more and more into that open space. And so there's some special hazards that obviously occur there. And over the next couple of days, we're going to see the traditional things that we see in October. The winds are going to shift. They're going to come out, and they're going to be the south down sloping winds. Fortunately, we don't have any south-facing slopes. It's all on the coast side. It's over on the East Bay Hills. So we're usually spared from the worst of those conditions. But as we've seen over the years, last couple of years especially, the fires are getting more significant. The average acreage of fires burned in the state is almost doubled. There's definitive proof that climate change is making this change in this pace, and over the next 10 to 30 years, that average acreage burnage is going to be the norm for us. It's just going to keep going up, and so we live in an incredibly safe area. We still have the coastal influence. We still have one of the safest areas in California, but climate change puts sort of an unknown factor into it, something that history hasn't shown us the guidelines for this because climate change is so new to us. So we have to be really mindful of that and take that proactive action. And I think that we can bring some reasonable approaches to making people's homes safe.
And Hillsborough recently had their first WUI event. I'm not sure what to call it. Sure, it was a community event. So just and this is kind of some of the options that we would bring to council. But Hillsborough adopted a wildland-urban WUI ordinance, wildland-urban interface ordinance, that is a requirement for all homes that are in the designated area that they have to perform a certain amount of what we call fuel modification. And so this is going to start happening next calendar year. To get the residents ready for that, we had 2 community workshops on understanding the ordinance, what they can do to be proactive, and what the expectations are of them, and that we're a resource for them. This is not, when you say ordinance and enforcement, it's like 2 things you don't want to say to the community. That is sort of the nature of it, but our viewpoint for CCFD is that we're in this together with the community, that we have to get through this together. It's new for us. It's going to be new if we bring this to Millbrae, and the community needs to understand that we're not going to come out and say, this is what you're doing, or this is a violation. It's really getting them to understand that they're doing it for their own benefit and for the benefit of the community, because it's not one home that does defensible space does not make an entire community safe. It's everybody in the community working together to provide that safety. That's the approach that we've taken. So we did do that at Millbrae. In Hillsborough, we would certainly do that in Millbrae if we go down that path. And my staff knows because we've all done that, we like the engagement because we need to hear from the residents and how we can best help them. And that's really been helping us to be successful thus far. Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. And on the same topic, on that same slide there, did you look at the area around the Spur Trail? That seems like a potential hazardous area. There's a lot of dry brush.
Yeah, and we've talked. I'm looking for Key back there. I worked with Key and Public Works because I know that they have a vegetation management plan. I know that's a part of the SPCU area. Going to get into out of my expertise here because that's a little more keys around, but we have had discussions on that. I'm going to put words in his mouth, but we feel like they have done a decent job there. And so am I okay by saying that, Keith? Yeah, they've done a pretty good job there. Keith kind of manages that, and so we just try to make sure that we're meeting that needs because of the impact to the residents.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to echo congratulations on your retirement. You entered the role a bit abruptly, and we really never missed a beat. Very smooth transition in terms of the city of Millbrae coming under Central County. And you had, I think, one of the more difficult tenures, I would say, during your time as chief here with our rec center fire and all of the various disasters around the state that, we stepped up and sent our firefighters out to help out. But this is around Millbrae. I've heard complaints about a number of different things. I don't think I've heard a single complaint about the quality of the fire department and the response times. You've really done an excellent job, and credit to you and your staff, and wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I echo that, but I also have a question. So with all these developments going on, what should the council expect in terms of needed extra manpower? What do you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, excellent question. So the standards of cover that I had mentioned is going to help us to get a more definitive idea of what that looks like, because it's easy to see where we are today and then projected this growth and say we're going to have a population increase of 15,000 plus in the next 2 to 3 years. But we don't know what that operational impact will be. And so that's why that study is going to help us to do that. But there's also a big leap to go from where we are to adding a new fire station or any level of staffing, because that's not cheap. And so we want to be mindful of that and take a strategic approach to doing that. And so if there are ways to augment staffing, if there's ways of some flexible staffing of some sort, and there's a lot of variations that have been done in this county that may help us to get there, that's probably the most prudent approach. But I think that standards of cover is going to help us to identify it and validate it and be able to move forward in a way of transparency with the community, because if we have to come back for staffing, there of course is a price tag for that, but the increase in the population, whatever operational demand that drives, we have to meet that need. And so we're very mindful of that, and that's why we're doing this study, because we don't want to just say, oh, we need a new engine, or we need another truck company, or we need a squad, or whatever that might look like. We want to be able to validate it with data and evidence-based approach, and so that's kind of why we're doing it. And we're hopeful, again, that we're going to get the monies out of the next budget. The goal would be, I won't be here to do it, unfortunately. At least when I'm coming back, I can come back and do that for you. But Chief Barron very well understands the process that we're in right now, and actually is kind of spearheading that. And I think a reasonable time frame would be about this time next year would be that study would be done, and he could come to you with what that study looks like and what the approach would be for that, for sure.
Okay, so maybe city manager, I understand that, did we get the impact fees? We're expecting impact fees and to pay for equipment. Does that also mean that we'll have to have another fire engine, or no?
Well, we're looking at both our development impact fees for capital as well as our fees for service. And so we've been working closely with the chief and his team, Fire Marshal Christine Reed. And so both of those studies will be coming to the city council here in the next few months. Actually, I think next meeting will be the fees for service, then followed with the development impact fees.
Okay.
And so that coverage of the service coverage area, something that the chief and I have been discussing, and something that once that's complete, then we can take a look on the level of service per capita cost, for example, as our population grows and development occurs, how we fund whatever the needs are for the fire department to maintain that level of service.
Okay, so for the audience at home, impact fees just pays for equipment, doesn't pay for the labor costs of staffing. So whenever if we buy a fire engine, that means we have to staff it with 9 personnel. Is that correct?
For 24/7, yeah, coverage. There's three per day, 3 shifts.
Okay, so it's not going to be cheap. You just have to. So I just bring that up because as a council, we need to plan our budget and look at ways to offset those costs.
Yeah. And we recognize that mayor and council members have been working closely with the fire department.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd also like to just say what a pleasure it's been to get to know and work with Chief Kmeyer. He's been outstanding. He's an outstanding leader, manager. He's approachable, responsive. Lines of communication have been fantastic. So it's been a real pleasure working with such a professional as Chief Kmeyer. He's built a great team, and I'm looking forward to working with Chief Barron, and of course, Fire Marshal Christine Reed does a fantastic job for the city. So thank you, Chief, and it's a pleasure, and hope our relationship continues into your retirement.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so on to the agenda overview. City Manager Tom Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Again, Tom Williams, City Manager. So moving to item number 2 this evening, it's agenda overview and staff briefing. Under that item, it's calendar of events, reports of bills and claims. Those are both informational items. Item number 3 is approval of the meeting minutes for the regularly scheduled meeting of September 24th. Item number 4 is oral reports from city committees and commission chairs. There are no reports this evening. Then we move into public communication. Any member from the public can come up and address the city council on any issue not on the agenda for 3 minutes. Then moving to the consent calendar. Item number 5, quarterly investment schedule for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2018-19. Item number 6 is consider approval of the rolling street closure and staff fee waiver for the Munster March event on October 26, 2019, hosted by the Lions Club. Item number 7 is to reject by motion 2 bids that we received for the median landscape maintenance services project. Item number 8 is an informational report on the confirmation of the 2019-20 mayor-vice mayor rotation. Item number 9 is consider adopting a resolution approving the submittal of all applications for the per capita grant program to support future parks and recreation facilities. This is a state-funded grant program. Item number 10 is to consider cancellation of the regularly scheduled meeting on November 26, 2019. That's the week of Thanksgiving. Item number 11 is to consider a resolution approving the second addendum to the agreement with Dimer Engineering Incorporated in the amount of $100,000 for professional engineering services. Item number 12 is to consider a resolution accepting the Magnolia Avenue and Richmond Drive bicycle and pedestrian improvement project as complete and authorizing the filing of the notice of completion with the San Mateo County Clerk's Office. Item number 13 is to consider a resolution accepting the Hillcrest Subbasin 3 Sanitary Sewer Capital Improvement Program project as complete and filing the notice of completion. Then moving to public hearings, item number 14 is consideration of an ordinance amending the Millbrae Municipal Code sections Titles 1 and 9 and adoption of the new definitions for Title 9, which includes the adoption of the 2019 California Building Standards Code, which includes the updated fire code. So that would be a waive of the first reading, introduction of the ordinance. The following meeting, we would then have a second reading of that ordinance for adoption. Our life's work is done because under existing business, we have none. Just as you think that's true, we do have item number 15 under new business, discussion of accessory dwelling units and ordinance preparation process. After item number 15, then it's council comments. There's no closed session this evening, and Mr. Mayor, I think you have on your notes adjourning the meeting in recognition of 2 members of the public that have passed away.
Yes, thank you. Any questions? All right, so on to the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, if I just a few announcements.
Sure.
So our first Millbrae Cultural Arts Advisory Committee Art Box project, if you notice on across the street from Trader Joe's in the landscape median, that's been completed. The second utility box, which is between the library and Starbucks, I think is now complete.
Yes, it's completed this weekend.
Okay, so we'll have some photos at the next meeting to share with you. Go out and take a look. So the box located in front of Living Spaces and Trader Joe's is in the median. It was painted by Samantha Lamb and Chloe Mercado from St. Dunstan's. And this is the first project that the Millbrae Cultural Arts Advisory Committee's utility box painting project was introduced and successful. So we'd like to thank that committee and the artists for the great work. Also on Sunday was the Japanese Cultural Festival. It was a fantastic event. We had over 1,000 people that attended. It featured numerous cultural exhibits, tea ceremonies, kimono dressing, calligraphy, the Akbana demonstrations, and a number of entertainment groups throughout the day. So I'd like to thank Kathleen Kamara and her husband, Kozo, for doing a tremendous effort in putting that festival together every year. On October 10th, very important meeting coming up. It's our traffic calming workshop. We'll host the second workshop to help try to make our city streets safer through various traffic calming and speed reduction techniques. That meeting will be at 6:30 p.m., again this Thursday, October 10th, and it will be in the David J. Chakouty room. So I encourage all of the citizens that are interested in traffic calming and speed reduction on our streets to attend that meeting. And of course, Millbrae goes to the movies a week from this Friday, so that's Friday, October 18th. The movie will be Hotel Transylvania in recognition of October as Halloween. It's a great movie, by the way. So the festivities start at 6 p.m. and the movie starts soon thereafter at dark. So we had a great turnout at the last outdoor movie. This is the last outdoor movie of the season before you move it indoors. So I encourage all the families and everyone to come out. It's just a fun night. Also, Mr. Mayor, are you ready? The very first annual Millbrae Rotary Cup Mayor's Cup Tournament is scheduled for October 24th at Crystal Springs Golf Course. This is a fundraiser for the Recreation Center and Millbrae Youth. People can sign up at www.bit.ly/MIL-golf, and you can also look on the city's website for that link. So I encourage everyone to come out, have a great time, and enjoy the fundraiser for the Recreation Center. Also, I'd like to, you've probably heard a lot of information about these PG&E electrical brownouts, and I'd like to ask actually our Chief to come up. He's been involved heavily with PG&E in discussions throughout the county, and he'll give you a quick briefing, community a quick briefing on what to expect and what's happening. So Chief Kunkel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Honorable Council, City Manager, and people of Millbrae. On behalf of the Sheriff's Office and our Division of Homeland Security, I participated in 4 conference calls today, 3 of which were regional for our area and 1 statewide one. There are 3 levels of shutdowns that are going to occur tomorrow. We're going to be in the second phase. PG&E is doing a planned public safety power shutoff, and it'll start tomorrow at noon and is anticipated to go to Thursday at noon. The city of Millbrae is not impacted. The communities in San Mateo County extend from the Tom Lantos Tunnel, which will be closed, all the way down south of the entire coast to the Santa Cruz border, up to about 35, including some areas on this side of 35 and Woodside and Portola Valley. The caveat with it coming back on Thursday is they said that the shutoff will end Thursday at approximately noon, but that doesn't mean the electricity comes back on. They've given themselves a 5-day window to re-energize all of their grids, which means that the electricity could be off for quite a while. So if you do business on the coast, if you're an employee that works on the, or if you live in Millbrae and work on the coast, or if you live on the coast and work in Millbrae, please plan accordingly. If you could please stay away. If you don't have vital business or family pressing matters on the coast, if you could stay away for the next few days. Traffic is anticipated to be very bad. We'll be sending out numerous SMC alerts. I know I've gotten like 6 in the last 2 hours. If you're not on SMC alert, we encourage you to sign up. That is how the county through OES and the county communications office will be pushing out information from PG&E. The information we have is all going to be from PG&E, and all questions should be pushed back towards PG&E. So if you have questions, according to PG&E, the best way to access information is at their website, which is just simply pge.com. This is a great chance. If you have, are you reliant on a medical device, or you absolutely need electricity and you have not registered with PG&E, please do so as quickly as possible. This is also a good opportunity for those of you who are not impacted to maybe start preparing and getting yourself ready at your house and your family ready with a plan, with some additional supplies, food, water, gas, even like charging electronics is important. And this is a nice preamble to our November 16th Disaster Prep Day, which will cover all of this. But you're continuing to get information over the next couple of days. Excuse me. All times and dates are set from PG&E. So when they put out their projected date ends Thursday at noon, that's completely dependent on PG&E. They were even saying, I was on a conference call till 6:30 tonight, this whole thing could go away. This is a statewide issue. 30 counties are affected all over the state, so it's not just us. But I think this will be a good opportunity for us to practice some core competencies, and we'll be better prepared in Millbrae. I know I've talked to the fire chief and the city manager, and I have a piece in Sheriff's Office command for the next few days. So I'll be taking all the lessons we learned for that back to Millbrae so we can be better prepared as things go on. And that's all I have.
Councilwoman Schneider.
I've been trying to follow everything. I was on PG&E's website last night, but it basically just had, it looked like it was in preparation. It didn't have any specific information. People of Millbrae, less than 10% of us are signed up for SMC Alert. Now, your kids can get SMC Alert. They can get it on their phones as long as their teachers let them have their phones during there, but the teachers can have them. This is the time to go to smc.org. It takes a couple of minutes to sign up for SMC Alert. It is the one place where you can trust the information coming through. When I was reading it on Nextdoor today, people are saying, oh, I heard this on TV, and I heard that, and I heard this. Go to smcalert.org. And I'm sounding like a scold right now, but I've been our rep for emergency services for almost 4 years now, and I'm sad that we're only at about 8 or 9%. Woodside, that went through a big fire scare last year or the year before, are at the 40 to 50%. We have a lot of improvement to go there. Get your news from the right folks. smcalert.org.
Thank you. I concur. And you can also get the exact same messaging out of the Sheriff's Office and County Twitter and Sheriff's Office and County, all of our social media. But we really, SMC Alert is going to be the primary source that we get information out the quickest, and it's going to be the best, most accurate.
And then I have a second request. Since our house is on the PG&E medical alert, we have had oxygen, 24-hour oxygen at different times. I'm not completely clear of people who are on medical devices, so maybe we can do some kind of special announcement of what people would or should do given the current situation.
Right. And I will tell you statewide, PG&E is struggling with that, including areas with hospitals. We have Seton Hospital on the coast. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes, and I intend to take a deep dive and learn as much as we can, share it with our partners in fire, and especially with the city manager and DPW, so the city is well prepared going forward. But that's a key. I agree. Our vulnerable populations are a key concern of all of ours.
Very good. And I know there were other people on Nextdoor today saying, well, should I get ice chests for my food? If you've got food in your refrigerator and freezer, you're pretty good for 24 to 48 hours. Just don't open the doors. I went through this during the Loma Prieta earthquake. We were without power for 4 days, and we were the center point of all the friends from the hills came down. So there is information out there. We should do our part to make it as easy to find. But keep your refrigerator doors closed. None of that trying to search around for the best yogurt. And to all our first responders, good luck.
Councilwoman Oliva.
Do you have any idea why they chose the actual neighborhoods they chose to do this?
PG&E has a process for this. They have been said repeatedly this is not a weather-related event, so it's not that it's hot. I'm sorry, it is weather-related, it's not heat-related. So it's a low humidity, high wind area, and it's mostly areas that slope downward. So from 35 down is really wooded in our county, and on the Woodside side, it's fairly intense wooded as well. So my guess is that has something to do with it, but it's been different all over the state because it affects 30 counties, and we have a vast diversity of flora and fauna in our great state. So it's going to, I'm not quite sure of all of their criteria for selecting areas, but I do know it covers, I think, as far south as Kern County, up to the Oregon border.
You'd like to know what the reasoning behind it was.
And the cutoff areas are unique as well. So, yeah, that is interesting, but that's beyond my scope of training. I apologize.
Thank you.
Anything else?
comment. I attended a wildfire seminar at CSM a couple of weeks ago, and they have a professor from San Jose State whose specialty area is fire-driven winds. It's a whole new specialty area, and if we had more interest in that, I'm sure he would come on up here. He explained what is happening with these fire-driven winds and the direction that is counterintuitive. It's going from the east to the west, as opposed to west to the east, which is what the chief said earlier. It was a great workshop. CAL FIRE was very involved, and a couple of professors doing this research that is really cutting edge. Learned from the last 2 fire seasons.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update.
And Mayor, just one more comment from staff. On Saturday, October 19th at 10 a.m., we'll be having a community outreach meeting, open house, to discuss the Gateway at Millbrae Station project. We'll be discussing construction schedules, operations that we'll be monitoring, such as traffic control plans, dust, noise, hours of operation, our coordination with BART and Caltrain right now on a parking management plan, both during the 2.5 years of construction, as well as a final parking management plan once the project is complete. We're going to have it outside at Aviador and the Highland Canal area, which is where the bollards are out in the Bayside Manor neighborhood, right at Aviador. So we will be doing a lot of advertising for this event, October 19th, 10 a.m., to where we can reach out to the community and let them know what's happening, what to expect, points of contact, et cetera. So 10 a.m., October 19th, out at Aviador and Highland Canal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, any other questions for staff? None? All right, so on to approval of minutes. Yes, I'm looking for motions. Thank you. Your votes, please. Sure. Okay.
The minutes passed with a vote of 4-0 with Councilmember Pappen excused.
I have no oral reports from city committees or commission chairs. Public comments. Is anybody wishing to make a public comment? Okay, I don't see any, and I have no slips. On the consent calendar, I have one item that's going to be pulled. Councilwoman Schneider.
That's number 8.
Number 8? Okay, number 8 will be pulled.
I have a comment on number 13.
And number 13? And
I have just a quick question on number 10, but I don't need to pull it.
okay.
You need a motion for 5, 6,
So-
7, 8, 9, not 8.
Yes, okay, so I need a motion for 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12. Okay, your votes, please.
Consent calendar items number 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12 passed with a vote of 4-0 with Councilmember Pappen excused.
Okay, thank you. And number 8, Councilman Schneider.
Number 8 is the annual council rotation discussion. The staff report has it going according to protocol. I'd like to read into the record a letter, and I have a copy for each of you, and I have a copy for Ms. Kastman and Elena, or Ms. Suazo, and the city manager. Okay, so reading this into the public record, there was a discussion with trying to figure out how to do this and not break the Brown Act. So this is, I thank the city attorney's office for providing guidance, but I felt that this was the safer way to go rather than doing this earlier. So dated October 8th, 2019, Dear Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Hollenberg, Council Members Pappen and Oliva, I am writing to express my desire in becoming mayor of Millbrae for 2020. I believe our city council has done a great job in 2019 and appreciate being part of the team that has moved forward on so many projects, from the community garden and recreation center rebuilding plans to future groundbreaking of 2 TODs. I have a year left in my term and have not been afforded the opportunity to be mayor. I think my becoming mayor can help the residents of Millbrae be more confident in the city, its actions, and the actions of City Council. I share this letter at City Council on October 8th, 2019, under agenda item number 8, and I will be publishing this letter following tonight's City Council meeting. And I see that I had typos. My apologies. In addition, I want to speak as to the rotation. This is my 4th year on council. I would have been in the rotation on my third year in council. That had been pulled. It had been discussed by the city attorney that our protocols for rotation, and I assume then any other protocol that we have, can be changed at any time. They're not codified, they're not law. So in that case, in the past 2 years, the rotation protocols have been changed. This is an unusual year in that for us on council, we're in our 5th year. It was changed because for the people in the audience, Millbrae had low voter participation, and under state law, we had to get our voter participation rate up in an odd year or switch to an even year. What we chose to do, I believe in 2016, it might have been 2017, was to move to add a 5th year onto that, giving all of us a 5th year in our terms. So this is a 5th year, which again makes the rotation protocol different because it's always been set on a 4-year, 4-year term, 2-year election cycle. Had the rotation been consistent with how the protocol was written, I would have been mayor in 2019, and Wayne would have been mayor in 2020. Based on the vote counts from the 2018 election, Ruben Holliber would be mayor in 2021, and Annie Oliva would be mayor in 2022. And then the top 2 vote getters in next year's election, 2020, would rotate in based on the vote count that they have. In addition, the rotation process was on our city council goals for 2018. It was actually goal number 8, and it did not get the review that it was supposed to have. So here we are tonight again. It's another, for me at least, an emotional night. I would prefer not to follow the rotation in the order that staff wrote it. I would prefer to make myself mayor and ask the vice mayor to be vice mayor again. And that puts us into the typical rotation pattern that we would have been in had we not had what has happened in the past, and we can move forward in a positive way. I think it's been a great year. I have enjoyed working with the mayor, and we have accomplished a lot. And that is my position tonight.
Okay. Any questions, comments? None. Okay, thank you very much for your comments. This is just informational. There's no real action, right? So.
Just information.
Oh, it is just to receive the report?
Correct.
Okay, so I have a motion. Receive the report.
Oh, just to receive?
Yeah, we're just receiving a report. We're not, unless there's no discussion. Is there a second? Thank you. And your votes, please. Okay, thank you. All right, so, sorry, go ahead, read.
Item number 8 passed with a vote.
I didn't mean that. I'm sorry.
Passed with a vote of 4-0 with Councilmember Pappen excused.
Okay, thank you. All right, so item 10.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about this because we typically do not meet in December. So if we cancel the 2nd November meeting, there will be about a 2-month gap without any meetings. And, if that's the council's prerogative, that's fine. But just want to make sure we don't miss anything important around that time. So I'd rather not have to come back in December.
Yeah, we have the first week that was canceled.
We typically don't have any regular meeting. We typically don't conduct council business other than mayor, vice mayor rotation in December.
We have.
Gotcha.
We have.
I think it's
preferred that we just make it mostly ceremonial.
Not to.
We prefer it to be all ceremonial. Yes. Yes.
I would only add, too, I'm perfectly open for special meetings if that needs to be, but what happens in December between communities and our fellow councils all going through their rotations, it becomes almost a 2.5-week whirlwind on that. So, I told the mayor I'm happy to be here, but if there's not enough business, if we need to for one of the TODs to move forward or emergency planning, are we around? Are we all around in that?
Can we just cancel the meeting, or do we have to vote on it tonight? That's the question.
You don't have to vote on it tonight, Mr. Mayor. We can monitor the business of the city and then make a determination at the next meeting what the calendar may look like.
But it's not like we have to I mean, the more important thing is being able to publicize a meeting, right? That's the law, is we need to publicize a meeting, so it's not as critical to announce that we're not having a meeting, right?
It can be canceled administratively, I believe, right? It doesn't require a council vote.
I think it does require a motion because your rules and protocols call for your meeting the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. So I think without action of the council, the meeting would go forward.
But we couldn't cancel it administratively, right? We can say, oh, there's no, we don't need to have a meeting.
You have 2 meetings between now and then, so.
Yes, you have meetings between, I think you need a council
Why don't we
vote.
wait? Why don't we wait?
Well, I just brought that up because I'd rather keep the regular meeting scheduled than have to do a special meeting. Just my preference. I could be in the minority here.
Yes.
I'll be the minority. I'd like to plan the holiday, so I'd like to vote on it.
And this is in one case where I'm kind of in the same thing. If we're not going to have the meeting, I'm going to go see family in Seattle. And it would be nice to know that I can plan a train or a plane.
Okay, what is, go ahead. I mean, whatever you guys, I'm open to either. I'm sadly going to be here, so.
You're welcome to
It's not sadly, I'm going to spend the time with my family one way or the other, so.
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on this tonight. Do I have to make a motion of that? Or
Yeah. Make a motion. Who wants a second? Oh, can you clear the board, please?
This is the motion just to
cancel.
We're going to vote on it or to cancel the
Cancel the meeting.
Cancel.
We can.
And I'll vote for this, but I really don't want to have to come back for a special meeting because of this. But
okay,
just putting it out there.
Okay.
I'll be around though, I think. Yep.
Okay.
Item number 10 passed with a vote of 4-0 with Councilmember Pappen excused.
Right. I also mentioned that the mayor's council coordinating meeting is going to be moved up a week because of Thanksgiving. And that mayor's coordinating council is for community, is open to the public, is for communities, organizations to come and coordinate schedules and talk about their events. And it's typically that Thursday, the fourth Thursday at 8:30 at the city manager's office.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and that will be on the October 17th versus the October 24th. So the month of October coordinating council will be October 17th.
Yeah, come by.
1 week earlier.
That's right. It'll be in Long Beach. Well, then we'll have the vice
Mayor and I
mayor.
are both in Long Beach for the League of California Cities next week.
Well, we'll try to get somebody there.
I'm not going to the annual meeting. That's not the annual. Is that the annual?
That's the annual.
It's late this year.
Yeah, it's very late this year.
Huh.
It's usually in September. So it kind of throws me off. Okay, so I'm 13.
Okay, my comment on 13, as everybody knows, I'm a fairly regular reader to Nextdoor, so I hear most of the community when they're complaining about things, and they're usually complaining that they're not seeing good things happening in Millbrae. And I want to say congratulations to Public Works for the completion of many, many projects. I was trying to help one resident with a complaint, and I went onto the website, and I couldn't find a list that said all of our current smaller projects and their status and what it meant, because one of the things that's most amazing when you become an elected official is how horribly expensive it costs to fix a street or to fix a sidewalk. So I brought this up, first of all, because I wanted to say thank you to all of Public Works staff, because we've been getting an awful lot of projects done, and it just may not be apparent to the public, and I would like to see us maybe do an updated web page. I've gone to other cities, Hillsborough being one. It actually talks about all their projects, and it gives a little explanation for it. And hopefully that's a way to make our public feel like, wow, things are happening. So again, congrats to Public Works.
Thank you for that comment. Also, on the same note, I've been getting reading on social media that there are people who are very upset with the water rates and the sewer rates. I'm wondering if the city could do a couple of updates to explain what the rates are and how they're decided. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have to raise them again. So people should understand why And it's just because right down to it, we're just a small town, and we have to pay for the party, regardless. Just like anybody else, you have startup costs. So our set costs has to be spread around by a smaller population with a very small commercial base. Other cities have commercial base to help offset costs. So, but I think that it'd be good if the citizens, and also they asked that it also be in multiple languages, so as people can understand. Okay, thank you. So can I have is there a motion? Can I have a second to approve number 13?
And to accept the report.
Yes. And your votes?
Item number 13 passed with a vote of 4-0 with Councilmember Papan excused.
Okay, thank you. On to public hearing. I hereby open public hearing. The ordinance amending the Millbrae Municipal Code Titles 1 and 9, adoption of the new definitions for Title 9, adoption of 2019 California Building Standard Codes, including the California Fire Code, waiving the first reading, introducing the ordinance.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Brad Meisner, Community Development Director. So this evening, I'm here to talk to you about the Building and Fire Code adoption for 2019. Just a quick few comments before I get into sort of a high-level presentation about why we're doing this at this time and the framework for the adoption, and then to get into more specifics. But I did want to just note that this has been a...
I don't know if the mic's not working.
Is this not working?
No.
Okay, there we go. It wasn't close enough. Apologize. Just a couple comments. I just wanted to state that this process has been a real nice collaboration between the Community Development Department and the Fire Department, and really even more specifically between our building official, Michael Cully, and the Fire Marshal, Christine Reed. So I wanted to make note that those folks are here this evening to talk about specifics, so you have them. But without further ado, this is the 2019 Building Code and Fire adoption. So why are we doing this at this time? Well, very simply, what happens is the State of California's Building Standards Commission is responsible for the adoption of new state building code, and that occurs once every 3 years. So we were in the 2016 cycle. This would take us into the 2019 cycle. But once the state adopts a new building code, then the local jurisdictions, in our case here, we can either adopt it as published, or if we wanted to make any kind of local amendments to our construction regulations based on specific criteria, we are welcome to do so. So it is a mandatory adoption of the state code with or without local amendments. We do have some local amendments, and the effective date will become January 1st of 2020. So with that said, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about some of the local amendments, some of the administrative changes that we have for the code, talk a little specifically about some of the tools that we're going to be using to look at work done without permits, to aid us in some of our code enforcement efforts, to talk about the building code and its relationship to other codes that we have. And then we can get into more specific questions if you have them. Off the bat, we do have some of our local changes to the code. One thing just was obvious to us is that Title 9, which is where typically our building regulations reside in the municipal code, we made a change there just to the title to call that Building and Fire Regulations, so it's more inclusive of what that chapter is really about. So it's not about just building, it's also about our fire code as well. We also have been able to, as I noted, make some administrative changes to address how work is being performed without building permits, without valid building permits in the city. Maybe the council has heard some complaints. We are taking a much more serious approach to the standard of care within the city. And so as of late, we've been really working with our building permit applicants and others that are doing work throughout the city. And especially if there's work that's occurring without permits, we're being much more visible, and we're working with applicants to make sure that they come into compliance with our building code. So with that said, one idea is that we want to have a little bit more of a tool to help us encourage people to obtain the requisite building permits they need for work. And so we have added a section to our code that gives the city the ability to impose fines, and taking it from essentially doubling of the fine up to about 10 times the building permit fee. Now, that's not an automatic. It's just a tool, and it's the ability for us to charge upwards of 10 times the building fee for cases that are seen as egregious. As I noted before, we also have code compliance cases that are happening throughout the city. So we wanted to be able to have some tools there to help us with bringing projects into compliance. As it stands now, if let's say we have a code compliance case, and to rectify that code compliance case, what is needed is a building permit. A typical frame on typical time frame on a building permit is 6 months. So what would happen is, as long as they pulled the building permit, they're technically have met their requirement to come under compliance with the code enforcement order, and they have 6 months to complete that work. Well, we found that to be a bit too much time. So one change that we're looking at is that the building officer would have the ability to impose a much shorter time frame to try to get the work done depending on what the scope of work is. So that's just another tool to help us bring people into compliance, especially when it's related to a code enforcement case. We have looked at some definitions that we have within the building code, most notably about the substantial improvements. And so this is a code change that essentially now will require the installation of fire sprinklers when there's a 50% addition or alteration of a home. So that's another change there. We have a number of other codes that are within this Title IX. So we have fire and other codes. We have a lot of the amendments that have been done back in 2016 are being carried forward into this version here in 2019. Regarding building addresses, there are things like sewer lateral requirements, roof coverings, spark arresters, and fire sprinklers have all been brought forward into this 2019 edition of the code. And then also the municipal code contains the adopted and amended California building standards from codes that are found in Title IX, but that also includes the fire code, historic building code, and existing building codes as well. So there's a number of codes that are all incorporated as part of this. So with that said, that's really sort of the high-level presentation here this evening. Of course, as I said before, we do have our building official here, as well as the fire marshal, if you have specific questions. Also, within the staff report, we did give you a summary of some of the changes. So I'm hoping that you found that helpful as a guide, just to help you understand where to find specific sections, or if you had questions about specific changes. So with that, I'll turn it over to the council. Of course, we are recommending that you waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance, which would amend the Title I, amending Title IX, and adoption of the 2019 codes. And so with that, we'll take any questions.
Any questions?
I have some, but I'd let others.
Vice Mayor Halber.
Sure. Just one quick question, and this may be tangential to this report, but I know a number of cities have begun to look at natural gas infrastructure and prohibitions on natural gas infrastructure and new construction, especially here in San Mateo County. They mentioned that the Peninsula Clean Energy representative mentioned that they're planning to be 100% renewable energy within the next 4 or 5 years, I think, for PCE. So is that something that you looked at all when doing these codes, or would that be kind of a separate type of process?
Thank you for that question, because you prompted me on something I forgot to mention. So as I did mention, a number of other codes are contained within Title IX, one of those being the Energy Code, right? Effectively known as Title 24. So that was adopted at the state level back in May of 2018 for the new 2019 cycle, right? And so that's January 1st of 2020 is when that goes into play. So that is a more restrictive energy code. But what you're talking about, too, is a process of what are known as some REACH codes, which are further restrictions even of the energy code now. And we have been talking about those REACH codes, and our intent is to come back to council with a separate conversation about the REACH codes and talk about what the limitations or what all those REACH codes would be, so we can have a policy conversation about how many or to what extent we want to adopt REACH codes, what would then be our local amendments within our code to the energy code. Yes.
Councilwoman Oliva?
Just kind of curious here on the local amendments. So when you come up with an idea of 10 times the permit fee if you're not getting your work done in the proper amount of time, does that come from one specific incident, or is this a common thing that has been going on?
Right. So I think, as I mentioned, I think one of the things that we're really focused in on is the standard of care and ensuring that people are meeting their obligations under the building code to get the requisite permits. We chose the number of the 10 times as really sort of the big stick if we need it. This code does not require that if someone is out of compliance that we will impose a 10 times the building permit fee. That number could move if it was the council's desire, but we chose that number to just effectively relay that we are serious about making sure that people have their permits. Again, there's nothing that requires us to charge 10 times, but we wanted to have that flexibility.
You're mean.
Well, it was interesting because Chief Kmeier was saying before that, to talk about enforcement and code sometimes is not always the most friendly thing, but we do live in a regulatory environment here with the city, and so as it relates to building and fire, that's a place that we feel very comfortable needing to ensure that we have compliance.
Councilwoman Schneider.
I'm glad that Vice Mayor Hulliver brought up the to me, in my world, it's called electrification of buildings. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us probably received a letter from the IBEW, so I don't know if that needs to go into the record, where they're encouraging us to go forward with REACH. Mm-hmm. I would be in support of going forward and looking at REACH. Right, my understanding it's for new construction, it doesn't necessarily affect a significant remodel, or does it? If we went into those REACH codes, or you're going to bring that back and we'll... Okay.
Absolutely, because I think it really warrants a nice policy conversation with council.
I referenced in an earlier agenda item that I attended this Wildland Fire Summit meeting, and I think a couple of you were there. They had the fire marshal from Woodside come and talk about their fire audit or their REACH program, and she showed a number of things that I believe are part of the ordinance in preparation, things I'd never thought of before. I live in a stucco house with a tile roof. I should be safe. Oh, no. There are all of these additional things that we should be doing, and it was really a terrific learning experience being at that summit. Do the new codes look at some of the things that say Woodside, which is in a much higher fire danger than we are beginning to implement? For example, all of us with tile roofs, where the tile goes like this, bird material can get in there, and they actually have little stops that you can put in your tile roofs to prevent sparks from getting in there. In fact, a big emphasis was also a lot of defensible space, making sure that you can get things that spark or fly and can fly a mile away. Do the new fire codes include that level of change?
So these current codes, they are a little different than our what we typically enforce on a wildland urban interface setting. However, the goal that we're trying to do with all of our inspections and our consultations with homeowners is education. That's the primary goal. So when we talk about things like the tile roofs or trees overhanging roof lines, we want to educate people to have them move that back. So where this doesn't, it specifically talk about requirements to that gain, it it is still the educational goal that we're going to do that. And when we go out and do complaint investigations, we're going to be looking at things like that as well.
Okay. Again, for the public, it was so interesting. If you have a plant that is touching a wooden sill, then that can be, because a lot of these fires are ground-based fires, instead of fires coming from the tops of the trees down, you can catch your house catching on fire from that. That was one of the examples of the Woodside Fire Marshal. I would only say, if we can put that in our future plans and keep an eye on that. I just was amazed. You think you're safe, and you think you've done the things that you should be doing, and you're not there yet.
Councilwoman Oliva.
One other question I had with regards to the time of work that everybody can see, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7, and Saturday and Sunday, or 8 to 6 and 9 to 8. Are those taken out of, do we have a noise ordinance in our city? Is that where that came from?
I'm sorry, a noise ordinance?
Yeah, is that where these, like, they can work on the property because of that, or?
No, aren't these in the code?
So these are the designated hours of construction.
Right. So is that correlated to because of noise?
Yes, actually, it's probably a long-standing requirement that we had these hours of construction. We just had to bring it forward to incorporate into the new code. So all of the amendments that we had in place when we were utilizing the 2016 code all have to be readopted again because they're amending a new code book.
Okay.
So they're just carried forward, and these are the established hours that we had.
These are construction, but does it pertain to other people that are doing work too?
It pertains to construction projects where
Just construction.
construction projects,
I just wondered where it came from.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
City Manager.
Well, I was going to say, and we do have a noise ordinance.
We do?
I believe we do. Am I wrong?
Well, it was kind of a party ordinance, right?
Nuisance ordinance, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years ago, it was kind of loud parties was really the intent of the ordinance.
Councilmember Halpern brought up Hillsborough, or somebody brought up Hillsborough, and I was thinking they have a noise ordinance.
I'll go back and double check because working with the chief.
I think the other issue is garden blowers.
Because we've looked at decibel levels as nuisance, but yeah, maybe I stand corrected in the actual noise ordinance.
There is some regulation.
Councilwoman Schneider.
Okay, this is going to sound very weird, but I am on SFO noise. We are subjected to more noise because we have more sources of noise. So in a future far away, identifying multiple noise sources and taking actions to reduce the noise from those that can. Looking at leaf blowers, an electric blower is a lot less noisy than a gas-powered mower. It also doesn't spark. And cities have been doing that slowly up and down the peninsula for the last 20 years. Los Altos, sometimes they talk about it, then they never quite enforce it. But from the airport noise roundtable and more from the ground-based noise ad hoc committee, we have looked at different material types that can help absorb the low-frequency noise that Millbrae is subjected to. These are new materials that they're coming out with. These are the man-made materials as well as the organic materials. Does this ordinance talk about any of that kind of sound remediation material? Okay. And I know that I hit heads a little bit with both developers for the two TODs that they could be putting up more insulation, better insulation. These new materials that absorb rather than deflect, that's what they're looking at now rather than the bouncing. It's still pretty new. So I couldn't even tell you, here are the materials to recommend for projects in that area, but it's coming. It's coming.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also have concerns about the hours. I think 7:30 is too early, a weekday. I prefer that maybe 8:30, 8 o'clock is reasonable. No, I think they allow them to run till 7, right?
Yeah, so the hours, as stated in the ordinance, are 7:30 a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays, and, on Sundays.
I still think it's 7:30 is way too early. I mean, most people think 8 o'clock is.
So I'm sorry, are these new hours, or is this existing already in the ordinance?
Yeah, these are existing. They previously were residing within the zoning ordinance, so we're bringing them over to the building.
But it's not a change in this case.
Correct.
Okay. I'm okay with these hours of construction.
Am I minority here?
I don't like to make this personal, but I will for a second. I live on Green Hills Country Club, and the lawnmower has a headlight on it at 6:45 every morning. So I want to be sensitive to our constituents that are going to go through the construction. And, I'm okay with 7:30 if they're okay with 7:30. I think that is something that we need to be good neighbors to. So I'm with Ruben that it hasn't changed, and that's why I asked that. So I'll be okay with it. But if it becomes a nuisance to people that are down there, and make sure it gets enforced. So
I'd rather be proactive and say that we have a rule that says 8 o'clock, you can't start before 8 o'clock, and that should be it. So, 8 o'clock is time most people plan for and know that 8 o'clock is the start of the day. 7:30 is before. It's only half an hour, I know, but still, it would reduce the amount of complaints that we would receive. Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Well, I guess we're keeping it that way.
Disagree.
That's fine.
You have to take the compromise of the workers too, Mayor. So they want to get their day over. So they want to start and get home to their families. So
yeah, I'm more worried about our residents.
I just want to make it sure that it's enforced, because if it's 7:30, then let's make sure it's 7:30.
Well, when those TOD 1 and 2 start and those jackhammers start at 7:30, then you start getting complaints. Well, it's legal.
I think we specifically, for the 2 TODs, talked about, because it's such a big work area, that they would start work that was closest to the residents later. Mm-hmm. I remember having a conversation on that. It would be more the individual projects. Frankly, the airplanes take off at 5 o'clock, so I'm awake. It just depends on where you are in Millbrae, what's waking you up.
And just to reassure this conversation, if we do receive complaints, and we do have nuisance elements of our ordinance, and we'll work with the contractor and the construction company.
Okay, it's just hard to defend when you say, it's 7:30, they're allowed to do it at 7:30, and, how do you say, it's a nuisance when the city allows you to start at 7:30? And I'm not really worried about the contractors and contracts. I'm more worried about the residents. That's who we have to answer to.
Well, school starts at 8 a.m. I think most people who work starting at 9 a.m., they're up by well before 7:30. So
a lot of people don't go to school.
No, I know, and there's seniors and whatnot.
But I would love to sleep later.
I wasn't bringing up the time for the point of it being too early. I was bringing up to the time. Has it changed? And if it hasn't changed, let's enforce it.
Just because it doesn't change doesn't mean it can do better. It can do better.
Nobody take advantage of getting there at 6:30. It starts at 7:30.
I think it's fine.
Okay. Also, I believe there's also a requirement for sprinklers in garage, and I remember that we passed an ordinance that says if we do remodeling, that you wouldn't have to put in the sprinklers. So now we're putting it back in the ordinance.
So that means even if it's a repair job, it would trigger the sprinkler?
It has to be square footage.
Right now, it has to be
No.
It's written in here as square footage.
So under substantial remodels, there's a percentage that you hit a threshold that the amount of work that's occurring to the house that we do require for our sprinklers. If you're discussing the sprinklers for the garages, that was long past gone by. There's still some houses out there that still have 2 sprinkler heads in the garage. It kind of defeated the concept of what that type sprinkler system was supposed to do. And the fire marshal could probably chime in a little bit more. Fire sprinklers are for protection of life, not the building. And the concept of putting sprinkler heads in a garage was because we had incidents of garage fires that were occurring. So they thought that was a good protective measure. The state, however, took and adopted a code that relates to 1 and 2 family dwellings that is for life safety protection. And it's to buy you time to get out of the house. Garage fires weren't. have been kind of slowly weaning away from the rate because people don't work on their cars anymore. A number of different factors that come into play. So the sprinkler heads in a garage, I don't know what year that we quit doing that, and we adopted in 2010, 2007. Yeah, the state adopted codes requiring sprinklers at all new homes. And so the amendment that we have is based on a level of work being done, alterations and additions to an existing home that triggers fire sprinkler requirements, as well as other requirements that we have.
Well, let's say they're remodeling their bathroom, so you're saying they don't have to put in a sprinkler?
Not for a bathroom, no. But we do track over a 2-year period how much work. So if they took a permit last week for a bathroom, next week it's for a kitchen, next week it's to put a little addition on, we do track that. If they hit 50%, then it's retroactive throughout the whole building within a 2-year period.
So if you are a new homeowner, you just bought the house and somebody's done remodeling, does that also count? Does the clock counts as well?
No, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so they're requiring it, so you're saying that in the old days, they put it in there for safety issues, life safety issues, and now they're putting it back in?
No, actually, it was put in the garages for property protection was the concept.
But now they're realizing.
And yeah, so the standard that's utilized has been in existence for 25, 30 years, something like that. And the state of California adopted that as a requirement a few code cycles back. All new homes get sprinklers. And they've always been kind of silent and left it up to local jurisdictions on how they want to deal with alterations and additions that are occurring to a house. So we have a requirement for the substantial improvements that if you exceed that level, the percentage of work, we treat it like a new house. You're going to put sprinklers in it. You're going to bring it up to meet the current energy code, structural improvements for seismic safety, and a number of other things.
And Mike, what is that definition? Just is it 20%?
It's a 50%, and there's a way that we calculate it. And then for sprinklers just by themselves, there's a different calculation if we're not getting that close because we're looking at other things on it. So, but the substantial improvement's the big one. And that's, we're treating it like a new home because the amount of work that's occurring there. So, okay.
Okay. Any other? I'm just saying we're kind of. I mean, we voted a while ago to not have to require sprinklers in garages due to a remodel, and now we're putting it back in. So I just want to.
No, it's been out of the code for quite some time.
It's been in the code, right? It's going back in the code now.
No, we don't require just 2 fire sprinklers in a garage.
But we require a fire sprinkler in the garage.
We require the house to be protected.
Oh, the whole house.
The whole house. And if it's an attached garage, it gets protection. If it's a detached garage more than 10 feet away, less than 1,200 square feet, we don't require protection in that.
See. So
it becomes an ADU.
Well, ADUs fall under some state regs, so that's coming up next. So.
Okay. So I don't want to bring the cart before the horse. So if we're going to talk about ADUs, I mean, this is a lot of this building code touches on ADUs. So it also depends on how we decide how ADUs are going to be built in Millbrae, right? So won't
there's
this
some
affect
different
ADUs?
developments in the requirements for that. So I'll let.
Can you cover some of that? So in the next discussion?
Yeah, this is the next item.
No, I know, but what are the fire codes going to, what are they going to require for ADUs? Is that going to just, are they just going to treat it like, are they going to treat it
Treat
just
it like a new unit, you mean, or would we treat it?
Yeah, how are they
that's
treating it?
Open for discussion, I think, policy decision, if state law does not address it.
So we're going to get your input and policy direction and bring you back an ordinance on that, Mr. Mayor. And it may be that you want to make changes to the fire code as a result of as your discussion. But I don't think I would ask you not to hold up the update of your building codes because we may put in place other requirements in the future. I think we should update our codes.
As long as we know that we're going to address that issue again on building codes again when it comes to ADU, right?
Reach is going to come back.
Right.
So I mean, that's another opportunity.
I think that these codes are constantly evolving. I mean, you have lots of opportunities through the year on different subjects to consider modifying regulations that are in place for whatever reason. But this is an exercise we like to get done so that it's in place before the first of the year.
I understood, knowing also that the momentum to get an ordinance done to change something for something takes quite a bit of work too. So if I can avoid having to try to get it all done all at once, and also allow us to consider the building codes as I mean, I'm fine passing the building codes. I'm just saying that we're going to be discussing ADUs, and that might affect the building codes. So.
Right, but I think what City Attorney was also talking about is that we're going to have to reconcile where the state is on some of the local building codes when we talk about accessory dwelling units. So tonight, just on that topic, we're just going to be looking for direction from the council to move forward the ordinance, at which time we will really look very carefully about what our ability is to create those types of standards.
Okay. Any other discussion? No? Motions? Thank you. Your votes?
This is to waive the first reading?
The first reading and to, do I have to close the hearing? No, right?
That would be a very good idea.
Okay, so let's take a vote.
Take a vote on closing the
hearing.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Oh,
public. Is there anybody who wants public comment on the on this aspect? Nobody? Okay.
so is this a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah. Don't we close the public hearing after first reading and not after the second reading?
No, we close the public hearing now. This is the one opportunity for the public to speak, and when it comes back to you for a second reading, we do not have to have another public hearing. Okay. You only have to have one public hearing.
Right. So last call. Anybody else want? All right, fine. So look, have a vote to close. This is, would the motioners like to change the motion to close public hearing?
I did already.
Okay, great. All right, your votes.
The vote to close the public hearing passed with a vote of 4-0, with Councilmember Pappen excused.
Okay, so do we have any more discussion with the council? No. Okay, so I have a motion to waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance. Okay, your votes. We need a new system.
The motion to waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance passed with a vote of 4-0, with Councilmember Pappen excused.
Okay, thank you. And knowing that all our businesses are done, we have no existing business, but we have new business. Discussion and accessory dwelling units, ADU, and ordinance preparation and process is informational in nature.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Again, Brad Meisner, Community Development Director. So the next item is, as you said, is an informational item about the progress that we're making on the preparation or hopeful preparation of a new ordinance to address accessory dwelling units in the city. So just by way of background, as you may or may not be aware, the state of California does have rules and regulations about how we need to treat accessory dwelling units. Although the city does not currently have an ordinance that addresses ADUs, we still permit them subject to compliance with the state rules and regulations. So I want to make that clear. So even though we don't have our own local ordinance, accessory dwelling units are still permitted within the city. And so tonight is going to be an opportunity to talk about some of the current state laws, to talk about some of the land use policies, and to talk about some of the process that we've been going through and some of the results of some of the community meetings that we've held. And then last but not least, for your discussion and then for you to provide us direction. And what we'd be looking for tonight, hopefully, is your direction to go and prepare an actual ordinance for Millbrae. So we've had this conversation before about housing. It's no mystery that there is a housing shortage within the state of California, and so Millbrae is no exception. We are looking at supply and demand issues, and so one of the ideas behind accessory dwelling units, it is an idea that it's much easier to create units on existing undeveloped land on the backs of properties versus having to go through the process, the entitlement process for major multifamily developments, to go through redevelopment, oftentimes including demolition and construction. So while accessory dwelling units would not add up to huge amounts like a major multifamily development, it is certainly a way to try to help address that shortage of housing units. It's also another way to help for property owners to come up with ways to help pay their bills, right? So you're able to rent out accessory dwelling units. And more importantly, it's also a way for families to kind of stay together. So if people want to have, if they have elder folks that they'd like to have age in place, it's a way to keep families together. So those are some of the policy considerations as we talk about an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So the process thus far is back when we had the priority setting session back in early 2019. This was one of the priorities that was identified for the community development work program. And so this is something that we've been working on. In August, we went to the Planning Commission with an information item to talk about sort of the policy issues behind accessory dwelling units and get the Planning Commission's feedback. And then we conducted a series of public outreach meetings. We did 3 of them, and that was from August 27th through September 10th. And then now tonight, we also want to hear from council very much about the policy issues as well. So as I stated before, currently on the books is the state law regarding accessory dwelling units. It requires that cities allow units in R1, R2, and R3 zones that we have here. So some people think that accessory dwelling units are only in places where single-family homes are allowed, but that's not quite true. It is allowed in multifamily zones as well, as long as the site only contains a single-family structure. One of the big issues about accessory dwelling units is how do we go about creating an ordinance but also preserving the nature and character of our neighborhoods, right? So we have many beautiful neighborhoods here in Millbrae, and so one of the things that comes up first and foremost is the notion of if you're going to add units, well, what do we do about the parking that's associated with those units? As it stands now, the state law essentially is trying to encourage municipalities to not require any parking for the units. It is seen somewhat as an impediment towards the construction of the actual unit itself. And so if the goal is to add more units, they're trying to eliminate some of the obstacles that you might find in development. As it stands, what municipalities are able to do is to require a maximum of 1 parking space per dwelling unit, per accessory dwelling unit. And if that accessory dwelling unit is within 1/2 mile of a high-quality transit stop, then you're not allowed to require any parking spaces. So the state law is rapidly changing in this arena. Just before we even came to council, there's a series of bills that are with the governor now that may change the nature and landscape of further how accessory dwelling units are dealt with. So we are being nimble with our ordinance. We're paying very close attention to what the state is going to require, but we also want to make sure that what the state is looking to require is right for the city of Millbrae as well. So I say all that up front here just to say that we're going to talk about the areas where we may have some flexibility to create our own local ordinance, but we'll also have to go back and reconcile what happens as it comes out of the legislature. But on the topic of parking, we did have the ability to ask this as a survey question when we did our community outreach. So as I mentioned, we did the 3 community meetings, and we were able to kind of ask a series of questions on different topical areas, and so one of them being parking. And one of the questions we asked is, well, should the city require parking space for every accessory dwelling unit subject to any state law? So while we don't have huge numbers in the form of the survey, we do have the data from the people that were there. So we had respondents from about 20 to 26 respondents. And, you know, sort of generally about 55% felt like we should not require the parking. Now, again, not an overly scientific survey and certainly not fully representative of the community, but representative of the people that were there nonetheless. Another question that we would like to get policy consideration on is on the size of units, on the height limits, and on architectural compatibility. As it stands right now, the state law sets a maximum of upwards of 1,200 square feet, or no more than 50% of the floor area of the primary residence. So what has gone on to date, we've had, again, as I mentioned, we don't have our local ordinance, so people are falling back to what the state allows for. We do have instances where accessory dwelling units are being able to be built at that upwards of that 1,200 square foot number, and for some lots that's a very sizable unit, especially if you have an existing home that's, let's say, in the 2,000 square foot range. The notion of what an accessory dwelling unit is that it is supposed to be somewhat subordinate to the primary structure. That's in the verbiage, right? It is an accessory dwelling unit. And yet at 1,200 square feet, that starts to rival what that primary house is. So that's one area where there is some latitude from the city's perspective. We can look at what we think the right size of an accessory dwelling unit can be. So with that was one of the questions that we asked the participants in our community workshops is, you know, should the city set limitations on size? Should we set limitations on height? And so we did have some community respondents that said, hey, you know, we really think that at about 50% of the respondents said we should consider limiting the height to 1 story. And I think that was predicated really on trying to maintain, at least for detached accessory units, trying to maintain them as accessory and sort of subordinate to the primary house on the lot. Moving on, we had a nice exercise in looking at sort of the metrics when we talk about lots. We looked at our lot sizes, our setbacks, the amount of open space that we have, and all of that is just to understand what would a typical lot, what kind of building pad and how much area would there be for the development of an accessory dwelling unit. And so one of the questions that we were asking, and the state, as it stands now, gives some flexibility, is whether or not you want to relax some of your setback standards to make it a bit easier to fit an accessory dwelling unit on a lot. Here locally, we also have a 1,000 square foot open space requirement that's on our lots that can be seen or could be seen as an impediment to development as well. So that was a question that we asked our community participants was, one, would we consider, or do you think the city should consider reduced setbacks on the rear setbacks? So currently it's 10 feet. So we asked, would it be acceptable if we moved to a 5-foot setback for detached accessory dwelling units? And then kind of hand in glove with that was, well, we have this 1,000 square feet of open space in the rear, 1/3 of a lot, and should we relax that standard if there's not adequate enough room to build an accessory dwelling unit? So just sort of the responses there were 69% of the respondents did feel that allowing a reduction in the rear yard setback would be acceptable. And then on the notion of open space, it was a little bit more evenly responded to, where 52% were actually opposed to relaxing the open space requirements, and about 48% thought it should be relaxed. architecture and neighborhood character. So this is something that is a theme that's coming up very often in many of the cases that we see in the city, whether it's single-family home design, large-scale development, or even down to an accessory dwelling unit level. So one of the ideas is, and the state law, it really kind of stays quite silent on this. So I think there's a lot of latitude here for us to look at how we think these should be developed from a design perspective. Once we have an idea of whether or not we're going to set a cap on the height, so in other words, if we were only going to allow one-story structures, perhaps those are not as visible. Would we want to be a little bit more relaxed in terms of what the design looks like? If they're two-story, they might be more prevalent from neighbors and or the front of the property. So there you might want to have a stricter standard on design. In any event, the question that we really posed was, should accessory dwelling units be compatible with the existing home, or should they essentially match the architecture of the existing home? And this was a very curious question. And so what it turned out was that really what was winning the day there was good design. So if it's something that is really well designed, that it doesn't necessarily have to match the architectural style of the existing home, but it does need to be compatible. So in other words, it needs to draw from some of the cues of the primary house. So whether it's a Spanish style, perhaps it should have a Spanish style type of design. If it's a contemporary home, then it should perhaps be taking cues and elements from that contemporary style. So again, it's not that it has to be 100% match, but that it definitely needs to be compatible. So if we make that policy decision about either match or compatibility, then it would be incumbent upon the city to sort of develop the standards by which we would gauge those projects. So those are the 5 areas that we're asking for guidance this evening. There were other comments that came up and things that we are aware of, like fire, life, and safety, access to the units, parking, and so this is a big topic. What we're really looking for is the go-ahead from council to go prepare that ordinance. There is a lot of work to be done, a lot of consideration to be done, especially, again, as it relates to where the state is in all of this and how much latitude we will have ultimately. But that is sort of my presentation this evening, and I'm very anxious to hear your comments and field any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments?
Like 100.
Councilwoman Oliva.
Well, I mean, there's a housing problem, and this is probably the easiest way to solve simple solutions to this. All the while, I mean, I'd like to think that we wouldn't have to put major restrictions on making this happen. I'm a little concerned with all of the graphings that 23 people participated in when it's 50-50. Yep. So based on that, that means there's going to be hundreds of people that are going to be, this needs an outreach with what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that the best graphing that I found, and I think that if we are going to talk about housing, we have to talk about transportation. So I think that van, I'd like if we could get staff to do something about the commuting van that would take these people that are living to get to that last mile to BART, the shuttle, sorry. I think that should be all part of this presentation, because that'll alleviate the parking issue, and it'll also maybe benefit more than just the ADU constituents.
Well, what about setbacks? Anybody want to comment about the setbacks?
Maybe we can go through these one by one.
Up to you, yeah.
So, do you want me to comment on setbacks? I don't really have a comment on setbacks at this point. I think that we should be open-minded to that. Because I think the real issue here is the parking and the cars and the transportation.
Councilwoman Schneider, sorry.
I went to I think the first workshop, was that the one that I was at? And it was very well attended. I was a little bit late. And so hats off to staff for doing that. I tried to get to the other ones, but I just was too many things going on. What I think happened at the workshop that I was on was a discussion of how these things would really work. I appreciate that staff had graphic examples which help with the visualization. But clearly something that might work, say in the neighborhood that you live in, Councilwoman Oliva, with the size of the backyard, the typical backyard versus the size of the backyard in my neighborhood versus what's up in Meadows where the backyards are much tinier. What came through from the group that I was with is that maybe the guidelines need to reflect the differences in our neighborhoods and the lot sizes in the neighborhoods. So not just the architectural style, but what can you reasonably do? You took the house I grew up in on Meadows and tried to put even 600 square feet little thing in the backyard. You can't. It just didn't have that kind of yard.
And I think we should be open to know that these are not just in backyards. Quite often they're in front yards.
I agree. Because I also read in that where it said that typically a front yard setback is 20 feet, but my house is less than 10 feet from the front yard. But the houses in Meadows are stepped much farther back. So I just wanted to point out that we talked about perhaps different guidelines depending on the neighborhood. As far as, I don't know if we want to go issue by issue. I looked at the bills, and I thank you for the explanation of what these three bills can do, and I don't know where the League of California Cities was on, but I would hope that we're pushing back. We are different in that we are small, and that a good portion of our residential stock is right on a transit corridor. So and we're also getting cars parking from BART and high-speed rail and the airport. So where they might go with no parking in other parts of the state, for any of us that are at a terminal train station, I think that's not being fair. It just is wrong. And we should be speaking up for that. That's my biggest concern, is too many cars on that. And Mr. Meisner, I know you and I talked about access to some of the homes, especially in this neighborhood, are built almost up to the property line anyway. So the only way to get to the backyard is either cutting through the garage or through basically 3 feet, which is what the fence line is built on that. So I would hope that as we go forward, I certainly want you to go forward with this. Go forward with more pictures that are very specific to our housing stock on that. I think the architecture should match. Speaking of Spanish, though, it's very hard to find technicians that have the skills to do the style of stucco work that was done in the 20s and 30s. If you can find them, great. I would have loved to have hired them. But it's hard to match that kind of stuff. And I was a little curious. My understanding is duplexes and triplexes wouldn't be a part of this. It says R1, R2, R3, and then I didn't know where duplexes and triplexes fit.
Right. So the idea is in the areas zoned R1, R2, and R3, if there's an existing single-family home, they would not be they would be able to have an accessory dwelling in it.
And I don't know if there's a duplex or triplex in town that could have the lot size that might allow for something, but it makes me concerned that the duplexes that are in, for example, Marina Vista, where quite often they have been turned into boarding houses, illegal, I know, but boarding houses nonetheless, that we should, again, keep an eye on what's happening in the neighborhoods there.
Part of the state law also says that even though an accessory dwelling unit would be allowed in those zones, nothing is to be read that would require us to go above and beyond the density that is established for those respective zones.
Okay. And then Millbrae hasn't dealt with this, but I lived farther into Silicon Valley where monster homes were the #1 hot topic for a number of years. We have a couple of houses in Millbrae that I would consider monster homes. For the public, those are homes that typically do build right up to the property line, as big as you can possibly get, dwarfing generally the structures that are nearby them. When I read the part about it could be a 2,000 square foot house with a 12,000 square foot, and that law may limit our ability to say no, that scares me. I think I'm much more comfortable with the smaller size units than, unless there's somebody there that has a lot that could be lot split and you could easily put a 12,000 square foot house. I just was really concerned when I read that and having the state come in and say, yeah, they want to build 12,000 square feet on these fairly large backyards that we have. That could dwarf every house around it.
Yeah, it's 1,200, not.
Oh, did I say 12,000? I meant 1,200. 1,200 is a good size house, though. And, you know, when I read the part about 1-story versus 2-story, and I listened to everybody in my workshop, to me, where I'm at is it kind of depends on the lot and the neighborhood. And it depends if it's attached or detached. I have visions when I read the 5-foot setback to the back of the fence, that, heck, I'll build this thing down in the back of my yard because it's not going to bother me, but it's going to bother all the neighbors around it. That was just my impression when I read that 5-foot setback. They get to keep all their open space. It's between the ADU and the house. But the backyard, the neighbor in the back, their house might be very close to the fence, and suddenly they've got this structure basically in their living space. So more pictures. It's a complicated issue. Who knew?
Vice Mayor?
All right, so just going through this, I tend to, one question about the parking, and I noticed the question was kind of asked two separate ways, and kind of, you know, obviously very small sample size, you can't really read much into it, but let's see, one of the questions said 55% believe that parking should not be required, but then another question, 71% opposed foregoing a parking requirement. So that kind of seems to contradict, those questions responses seem to contradict each other. I tend to, I think I lean towards supporting a on-site parking requirement, you know, especially for larger units, but you know, in general, I think there is a lack of street parking in Millbrae, and you know, it's great if they don't have a car, but most tenants do have cars, and it's basically like another apartment unit, and we require on-site parking for apartments and other types of housing, so I don't think that should be different. As for height limits, you know, 1,200 seems a bit large, so, you know, looking at this bill, I don't know what the fate of it is. 850 square feet kind of seems a reasonable amount. You know, 640 is a little bit on the smaller end. I think 1,200 is a little bit too much, but somewhere kind of in that middle range I think would be appropriate as a size limit. I don't have any issues with the setback requirement. I think reducing it to 5 feet is acceptable. And then I would say compatible architecture with the existing building is, I think, sufficient to me. I don't think it necessarily needs to match exactly, but it certainly shouldn't clash either with the existing house or with the neighborhood. So I think the compatible requirement is a good standard to have. Oh, and also I appreciate this table that you have at the end of the report, which shows the various other cities as good, I think, models for our future ordinance.
Well, and the one thing, just real quick, I was a little bit remiss. I didn't mention, and I really like to, the work that was done on that from the housing department as well as the planning division collaborating together, and also we had our planning intern that was able to see all this in motion and watch the workshops, and I just think that was a really nice process thus far for that collaboration, and also to teach our up and coming government workers as well.
Thank you.
And thank you. I forgot to mention that. There were interns at each table. It was really a great process.
Okay, I don't have an issue with the setbacks. I'm fine with going back to 5 feet. In terms of plans, I'm pretty open-minded, being a planning commissioner for a while. I think, you know, it's okay to have, especially since Millbrae has so many different types of architectures anyway. It's, you know, as long as it's tasteful and it's going to go through a planning commission. Parking is an issue for me. I think that's something that we have to solve, and maybe the parking improvement district that we're talking, or authority that we're talking about, can solve a lot of those issues. And we need to monitor that closely. And in terms of height, I think if it's, I think more than one story is fine with me, as long as like it's appropriate. If it's blocking a lot of views, and it might be an issue. If it's standing, if it's it shouldn't be taller than the main building, the main house. That's my only thing. In terms of, and my other question is ADUs and inside building in-laws in houses too, like back of the garages or whatever. Was that part of the discussion or not? Because I saw something about that, but it seems like our discussion tonight was all about detached ADUs.
Right. So there are really kind of three ways that you can have the ADUs into the law. There's a detached accessory dwelling unit, there's attached, and then there's a notion of what's called a junior ADU, which is essentially creating an ADU within the existing envelope of a home. So there are different versions of doing that. So it doesn't have to be detached.
So we're also talking about ADUs for inside, what do you call them, in-laws?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And those would follow the same building codes too?
Right. So, and this is something that we do need to look at, because there are some, we were talking about fire sprinklers earlier, right? So under the state law as it stands now, if the primary house is not fire sprinkled, they give sort of an exemption on that for detached. So these are the types of things that we need to work our way through the law just to make sure our ordinance is right. But yes, I think the notion of any addition onto a house or the creation of a unit within a house would have to meet our building standards. Sure.
Councilwoman Oliva.
In that case, the parking would not be affected. Then there would not be additional parking because you're not adding on to the house. If you fixture downstairs as a unit, it already existed already.
Right, but we would still have the ability, if we wanted to, and of course we can create different approaches as it relates to detached units and attached units.
Yeah, we'd have to just.
Yeah, so we could require up to one parking space as the law is now, as long as that house is not within a half mile of the high quality transit stop. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, a point of clarification, Brad. So once we adopt our accessory dwelling unit ordinance, there is no public hearing, right? It's all administrative?
Yes, so I was going to touch on that. There's the Planning Commission, all of these under the state law are meant to be ministerial actions. So what we really need to do is ensure that we have the standards that are right and appropriate in the ordinance so that we can ensure compliance. But they would not come forward for a public hearing.
Vice Mayor, and then Councilman.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention. Sorry, I think I forgot to mention for height requirements. I think I would lean towards 1 story if it's a detached unit, but if it's part of the existing build, if it's attached, it could be 2 stories. I think that would be my preference, similar to what Burlingame has in their ordinance.
Councilwoman Schneider.
I'm trying to find which of the potential new laws that deals with garage conversions. I'm uncomfortable with garage conversions. I wonder if there's been any studies that if you do convert your garage to more living space, where are these people putting their stuff? Is the stuff beginning to accumulate in rooms? As a Red Cross fire volunteer, when you come into a building after a fire's happened, often you've got many people living in a home, and the rooms are just it's not hoarding. They're not hoarders, but they're living in a small space, and there's so much stuff. You take away a garage, which is a place for stuff, and we Americans like to accumulate a lot of stuff. To me, that increases the chance of fire danger. It increases the difficulty of getting out of the house for that. I don't know if there have been any studies. Our fire staff have left. I might be the only one worried about it, but I've been in these buildings after a fire trying to walk around, and there's just so much stuff because they've converted the garage to living space. So I'm not a fan of garage conversions. The house next door to me did it. I came home from vacation. Suddenly there's a whole wall of windows. I know the language in here takes care of that, but they had windows looking right into my bedroom, 4.5 feet away. And, garages are for cars.
That's a novel idea.
It gets some of them off the street, too, which makes the street safer for cyclists and pedestrians.
Imagine if we all put our cars in the garage.
Yeah.
I'm a little guilty right now, but I'm getting one in there.
I've seen people use their garage as storage units, so it's like, that's, I don't know. Either way, I don't think, to me, I think if you can get another dwelling unit in the garage, then that's fine with me.
Yeah, I don't think that's the best place to put housing, but I think what I'm more concerned about is sort of the unpermitted. I don't know about the house next to you. My guess is that was not permitted, and it was not. It was probably a substandard.
Rip it all out.
Yeah, it was probably a substandard unit. So I think that's what I'm a little bit more concerned about. If they want to make it fully up to code, maybe that's okay, but I don't think that should be the preferred place of where to put a housing unit.
Okay. Did you get all you need?
I think I do. Yeah, there's a lot. I think as Councilmember Schneider mentioned, there is a lot to this, and so we will really be monitoring what's happening at the state level and trying to come up with the best tailor-made ordinance that we can based on the feedback I heard tonight. I really do believe that the neighborhoods are different and unique, and so we do need to come up with different standards probably for different size lots and different situations.
Councilwoman Stein.
I'm guilty. It's been a busy couple of months for me, and I didn't stay up with the pending legislation as it went through. So I'm wondering if these laws, maybe the governor will veto a couple of them, because a couple of them sounded pretty power grabby to me. Well, he did. He beat.
Yeah, I don't think we should hope for that. I think.
So my request would be maybe if we could get a staff update. I'm even behind on my League of California Cities work, and that's my bad. So, but if we could get an update of these to know what we have to start complying with, I would appreciate that.
I believe the governor is required to sign all the bills within a week. So we will know in about a week what's law and what's not.
Okay, I think we have one speaker slip, so if we can get to that. Stephen Green.
Did you go on Jeopardy?
I did.
When is it going to air?
It aired in July.
Dang, I wanted to have a Jeopardy party for you.
Can we on-demand it?
I have a copy if you need one.
Yeah.
I lost.
Oh, hey, at least you got there.
If I had bet nothing, I would have won, but I bet everything, so I lost.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Stephen Green, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and a background as you enter into this discussion and this process to create Millbrae's ordinance for ADUs. As a resident of Millbrae who's been here for approaching 2 years now, I was present during the discussions for TODs 1 and 2, and one thing I heard a lot from the community was that what we're looking for in Millbrae is smart, slow, incremental growth, and that's really what seemed to be what people preferred in the city. And I want you to be aware and keep it in the front of your mind that ADUs are probably about the slowest, most incremental growth you can have. Just adding one smaller unit to the back of a larger house is probably the least impactful way. You're not adding 600 units at a time, right? The other things I wanted to point out specifically with regards to the zoning code is that we have a lot of lots in Millbrae that are non-conforming, and it can make, what would be a great spot to put an ADU could make it on paper impossible. Things like our 1,000 square foot yard requirement, which are unique to Millbrae, can make some of these ADUs harder to fit in a backyard. And then I also wanted to mention size restrictions specifically. One thing I would like to clarify is that, as staff mentioned, if you have a main unit that's 2,000 square feet, with the current state law, you would not be able to build a 1,200 square foot ADU. The max size you'd be able to build would be 50% of the main unit, or 1,000 square feet. And I'd like you to be compassionate when you're deciding size limits. You know, be mindful of the amount of space that you feel that you would be able to comfortably live in with you or a spouse or something like that, the kind of person who'd be living in one of these ADUs before you, you know, confine us to a cubby hole or something like that. Councilwoman Schneider mentioned specifically she's worried about people having space for stuff if they converted their garages. Keep that in mind when you're deciding how small is too large for an ADU to be. Thanks so much for your time. I'm looking forward and following this process closely, and I think that ADUs in general are a great path for Millbrae to grow itself and meet its, you know, RHNA goals for the future. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Okay, so this is informational only. If there's nothing else, we can move on to council comments. Is that okay?
Want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just make this quick. I just wanted I know that it's already been done, but I personally want to say that big shout out to the Kimuras for the Japanese festival. It was a huge success. The weather was perfect for them, and the company and the food was awesome. And thank you so much for having people like the Kimuras in our community that make events like that happen.
Great. Vice Mayor?
Yes, I'd like to echo those comments as well, and once again, congratulate the Millbrae Man, Woman, and Student of the Year. I don't think I've had any meetings since the last time we met. And we'll be meeting tomorrow morning with commute.org for a steering committee to go over strategic planning for the next, I think, 5 years or whatever we'll be discussing at that time. But it should be interesting, and I'll keep you updated. Thank you.
And Councilman Schneider?
I'm a little unclear as to how we go about the ABAG nominations and votes for president and vice president, but we got another email today on it. I don't know, Mayor, if I want to talk about that offline, because I'm the ABAG representative. You're on the ABAG board, but I'm the vote on that. So they are seeking nominations for president and vice president of ABAG.
Yeah. I can talk to you.
Okay. All right. So just give me direction, or council give me a direction of what they want to do on that. In terms of airport roundtable, it's actually been a busy month. I think I reported on a lot of it, but at our roundtable meeting last week, for the first time, they brought a scientist, and who knew that the FAA has an environment and science division? I don't quite have the name right. And they came and talked about what is beginning to happen more, the health effects of noise, as well as the health effect of other pollutants coming from airplanes, so particulates. There was a discussion of the 3 or 4 different sizes of particulates. This gets very jargony, but smaller than 0.1 microns, which can get deep into your lungs and can cause problems. And people in the community have been talking about increased dust with increased air traffic. But it was nice to know that they are doing studies. They also talked about how different airplanes are certified, and it is my guess that they're certified based on a type of noise that is not the noise that is affected by Millbrae. So I think it's time for the city of Millbrae to write a letter to the FAA Science Board and to find partners in other communities like ours that are in close to airports and are affected by ground-based noise. So it was great to have him there. He gave an awful lot of information in a half an hour, and I haven't had a chance to absorb it. It's very, very science oriented, but it's the beginning of health effects on that. I did report 2 weeks ago that what was formerly called Sea Change, or where I've been assigned to do Sea Change, it was the Climate Action. They're now going down from having those convenings to different groups working on different subjects. I'm on the fire subcommittee, and so now, kind of like the old Grand Boulevard, they're breaking down into these subcommittees, and there is opportunity for different areas. I chose fire. There's a housing component of it, and I can't remember. One is policy, and I can't remember what the fourth one is, but if you're interested, it's on the website, and they have room for everybody on that. And I think with that, we had Millbrae came and spoke up about our bike grant. It's going to be very competitive. I'm still grading mine. The grades will become public from the county bike pedestrian committee on October 24th. I think it's the 24th, and then it'll go to CCAG in November. Very competitive. 13 really good grants. There just simply needs to be more money for bike and pedestrian activities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report. I don't have much to say except for the Lions Marinated Crab Feed's coming up October 26th. Anybody want to eat lots of crab? It's unlimited amount of crab. I guess how much you can stuff yourself. So if you just go to the website to sign up, it's millbraelions.club. And I think, and then we're going to close in memory of Victor.
Can we do one more since you're doing lion stuff?
Oh, okay, sure.
October 26th is both the Lions Crab Feed. It is also Millbrae Machines, which we did a consent calendar for. Last year, the Halloween parade was at Central Park.
You mean the Monster March?
Monster March. What did I say?
Machine.
Okay. Sorry, Monster March. So all of your kids in costumes, that Saturday will be a chance to come and play carnival games and food, and that'll be across the street from Living Spaces. It'll kind of be more the way it used to be done. And I think the Rotarians have their carnival the next day. Historically, it's been Lions on Saturday and Rotarians on Sunday. So kids get those costumes. Adults, actually really fun is whole families come out in costume, and it's really fun.
I think we just voted to close the streets.
We did.
Too, so they're going to do a parade.
Yeah, they're doing the parade.
And you can also collect candy along the way. So we're going to close in memory of Victor I'm sorry, somebody help me. Krakiakakis.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a Greek name?
Yes. Korkamelis. Kyriakis, thank you. No. Victor, longtime Millbrae resident and former Daly City Mayor. And also Jose Moreno Villalella, father-in-law of Public Works Management Analyst Rose Villalella, and also Donald Junkins, former Millbrae Planning Commissioner, former Millbrae Lion, Elks Club member, Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus, and they will all be missed. And that's it. Good night.
Hey, Ruben.